All members take your seats and cease all talking. The clerk will read the captions to a group of privileged resolutions.
Thank you, Colonel. This first resolution, invitation resolution, being read for the first time today and referred to Committee on Rules. A resolution by Representative Abrams, 89th, recognized month of April 2013, Genocide Prevention Awareness Month at the Capitol, inviting the Georgia Coalition to Prevent Genocide to be recognized by the House of Representatives. Resolution by Representative Hitchens, the 161st, honoring Mr. Jim Chavers. These are resolutions to be read for the first time and adopted. Resolution by Representative Dickey of the 140th, recognizing and commending Aretha Watts Neal on the occasion of her retirement. Resolution by Representative Dickey, 140th, commending Stratford Academy, Bibb County's 2013 Star Student. Resolution by Representative Dickey, recognizing and commending Stratford Academy, Bibb County's 2013 Star Teacher. A resolution by Representative Hughley, 136, commending the Links Incorporated, recognizing March 26, 2013, Links Day at the State Capitol. Resolution by Representative Scott, 76, commending Mrs. Devlin White, and a resolution by Representative Stevenson on the 90th, recognizing and commending Glenda Baskin Glover for her outstanding accomplishments through the privileged resolutions.
Is there objection to adopting the privileged resolutions? The chair hears none, and the resolutions are adopted. The House is on to the rules calendar. Chair recognizes Chairman Sims to present House Bill 400. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 400 by Representative Sims of the 169th. Bill to be entitled Act amending Code Section 3682.1 relating to elections for approval of bonded debt, so as repeal certain provisions relating to population brackets. Bill having been for the House Committee on Intergovernmental Coordination. The committee recommends the bill to pass. Bill is being read today for its third time.
Now the chair recognizes Chairman Sims to present the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen of the House. You might want to listen to this one, and these are going to be several of these coming over the next few years, however long it takes. It's about 511. This is a population act, and they're unconstitutional. And what we're doing, this one just states that in a certain bracket of population that a bond referendum can only be done at a certain time of the year in November. The general law now applies. They can have a bond referendum anytime they want to have them. They can have a special election. They can do it in the primary whenever they want to do them. This bill does nothing. It's just sitting on the books, and it really just is sitting there. We're just going to repeal it. You can feel good about taking something off the books instead of putting something on. So this is all the bill does. I'll stand for any questions.
There are no questions.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I hope everyone will vote for the bill. Thank you.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas were 171, the nays were 2. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 188.
House Bill 188 by Representative Coomer of the 14th. Bill will be entitled Act amending Title 43 relating to professions and businesses, so to provide that certain military certifications shall entitle persons to obtain certain professional licenses in this state. Bill has been for the House Committee on Defense and Veterans Affairs. The committee recommends the bill pass by substitute. The bill is being read today for its third time.
Chair recognizes the governor's floor leader, Representative Coomer, to present the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let's start with saying something very profound, and that is that this bill doesn't do any more than what it says on the paper that it does. As with some of our colleagues across the way over there, the rumors about this bill are far more scintillating and exciting than what it actually does. This is a very basic bill, and so let me get right to it. I'll tell you, first of all, there is a shortage of skilled workers, skilled trade workers globally. It's a global economic problem, and we're not immune to that here in Georgia. By the end of this decade, we expect to see 60,000 vacant positions in skilled trades just in the 5 skilled trades that are listed in this bill. And for your reference, those are electrical contractor class 1, journeyman plumber, conditioned air contractor class 1, residential light commercial contractors, and utility foremen. Those are all basically the entry-level skilled trade positions in those five areas of practice. And at the same time, we have a shortage of skilled labor. We also are seeing in the next 3 years 60 to 80,000 veterans leaving military service, active service, and entering the civilian workforce. So what we're really trying to do with this bill is streamline the process for helping those veterans get into skilled trades more quickly as appropriate. So how do we do that? The bill really has 3 basic components. First, it creates a working group, and then that working group has 2 tasks. So those are the 3 components. The working group is composed of members of the relevant state licensing board. So those are the actual experts on the ground who are doing the job day to day. And on most of those boards, those are the same people who set and establish the licensing requirements in the state of Georgia right now. So that's the first component of the working group. They're also going to be joined by the Secretary of State's licensing division director, who is the point person for driving the licensing process, and also members of the Governor's Office of Workforce Development. The reason those folks are involved is because they have, through federal grants, the people and resources to do the kind of research that we're going to ask this working group to do in the 2 tasks that we set out for them. The first task is for them to identify military jobs and really personnel classifications and codes that have requirements that meet or exceed the certification requirements for Georgia skilled trade positions. Once they identify those codes, this working group will be empowered to allow exemptions from some of those requirements if it's appropriate, but only if it's appropriate. Only if the working group determines that there wouldn't be any kind of problem, any kind of safety issue, any kind of shortfall that would be created from an exemption. I'll give you an example. In the HVAC contractors requirements, they have 10 separate requirements that the contracting board itself, or that the board of HVAC contractors themselves have set out. Some of those requirements include reference letters, character reference letters. Some of them include work experience for a period of time in a particular area or a particular field. Those are requirements you have to meet before you can even sit for the exam. So it may be that this board determines it's appropriate to allow a veteran who has served and met particular classification and had certain experience to be able to sit for that exam sooner. That's one of the things they'll be looking at, is how to get military veterans into the skilled trades more quickly. Rather than sitting on the sideline for 4 years waiting to take an exam, they might be able to take the exam more quickly. The other thing that this bill would do, or have addressed in this bill, is the issue of military spouses who come to Georgia from another state with their family, who may have obtained certifications in these skilled trades in their home state. If a person comes and they meet those criteria, they can come and apply to the licensing board for a similar exemption. The licensing board then does task 2, or this working group does its second task, which is to review the requirements for that license in the state of origin for that military spouse. And if those requirements meet or exceed Georgia's requirements for licensing, then the board can issue a rule that exemptions should apply for that military spouse. So those are really the things the bill does. Let me briefly touch on what the bill does not do. Well, and before I get to that, let me say this. The working group may determine that no exemptions are appropriate, that there is no way to allow for any exemption from any of their requirements and still meet all of the safety and economic considerations that they have to safeguard. So the bill does not mandate any change. It simply establishes the working group from existing offices in state government and tells them to look for an opportunity. So there may be no exemptions in the end. What the bill does not do, very briefly, and this is probably the most important thing I'm going to say to you based on what I'm hearing in terms of feedback, the bill does not exempt anyone from taking an examination for certification. There is nothing in the bill that directs anyone will be exempt from any testing for certification. Let me say this very clearly. There is no exemption written in this bill that says anyone is exempted from taking a test for certification. It also doesn't exempt anybody from applying to the board for a license. It doesn't allow a waiver. It doesn't even authorize a waiver of a requirement for insurance or financial stability requirements, as some boards require. Ultimately, it does not change any rules or requirements for certification whatsoever. It doesn't create a new agency. It doesn't create new offices or government posts. All these members are already in the state. I will finish on this point. Military, we know that the military presence in Georgia has about a $21 billion, with a B, billion dollar impact on our state economy. And it is prudent that we would seek ways to make Georgia more open, welcome, and friendly to military veterans, as well as active military members and their families. There is an amendment that's been offered, and the governor's office opposes the amendment at this time. The letters of endorsement that you've seen from the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, who, by the way, is making this a scorecard vote, from the NFIB and others who support the bill as it has passed. I'm just reflecting what's in the letter on your desk. Those folks who've endorsed it as it passed committee, did not endorse an amended version or the amendments. They haven't reviewed the amendments, as far as I know. The amendments were not considered in committee, and therefore it would be, I think, inappropriate to pass these amendments without the regular committee process being undertaken. The Technical College System of Georgia, who would be required by the amendments to do additional work, haven't testified about their ability or their willingness to meet what looks like an unfunded mandate. I have not heard from any member of the TCSG board myself. So as to the amendment, I'm asking you to vote no. I think it would be imprudent and irresponsible at this point to pass an amendment that has not been thoroughly vetted when this bill has already gone through so many hours of committee, so many hours of discussion with the constituents and the affected folks. So I'm asking you to vote no on the amendment, asking you to vote yes on the bill. Thank you.
The gentleman has questions.
I will yield.
Chair recognizes Representative Dukes for a question.
Would the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Listen, I really appreciate the work that you've done on this bill, particularly trying to move efforts forward for veterans who have served so honorably in this state, served this country, rather. But is it not true the reason that we established these rules and regulations for these particular services is to protect the public?
Yes, that's correct.
Well, would the public be, how would laxing these requirements, even though we do want to do whatever we can for veterans, be in the best interests of the public?
Well, I think if you look at the structure of what we're doing, the very same people who establish those requirements, these boards, are the major component of this working group that's going to be reviewing ways to streamline the process for veterans. We're not trying to short-circuit any process or shortcut a process, but again, going back to the HVAC contractor's example, one of the things that's required, or they're required to have 3 letters of reference, character reference letters. they have to be from a Georgia engineer, a Georgia architect, or a Georgia HVAC contractor, or a Georgia inspector. If a member has been serving abroad or just in another state for 20 years and they haven't been in Georgia, they're going to be at a disadvantage for getting that kind of a character reference letter from a Georgia civilian. The committee or the working group may decide, in lieu of that specific letter, we can take a look at their performance reports, or we can accept a letter from somebody who's not a Georgia engineer or contractor. And again, the point of this is, it's a clean slate for this board to look at opportunities for making this a streamlined process for veterans. And it is certainly not the intention of the author or the governor's office to eliminate any safety issue, any safety safeguards.
And I do understand that, and I appreciate it. I guess the biggest question is we will have to kind of wait and see what the working group comes up with, because there was a reason why we wanted those letters from those licensed individuals, because is it not true that these people could speak to the capacity of the people that's going out, wiring up people's houses and their businesses as to what their performance and their capacity is? Now, to remove that would somewhat put it in peril, but I'm hoping that the group that comes up with this and reviews it is very prudent in their consideration of making sure that people are qualified when they go to do this work. Is that not true?
I think that is true. I would just
I hope
add,
that is true.
I think, based on what I understand you were telling me, I think that's true. I would say again, the statute, there is no statutory set of requirements for most of these areas. These are the requirements we're referring to are set by the licensing board, and the licensing board again is a member of this working group.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Representative Benton for a question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir, I do.
Is it not true that we've had several discussions on this piece of legislation,
Yes, sir, that's true.
and we still don't see eye to eye on it, correct?
I hopefully we'll get there by this discussion.
Okay. In your explanation of the bill, we talked about, or you talked about giving people that had served in the military, in most of these jobs you have to have 4 years of experience to be able to take the test. Would you be willing to give people that have worked for an air conditioning contractor or an electrical contractor for 5 or 6 years a waiver on taking the test if they wanted to do so?
Well, that's not up to me because I'm not an HVAC contractor. I wouldn't be qualified to make that call. That's why we're putting this decision-making authority squarely in the hands of these folks who are the experts in the field, along with the other members of the working group. I don't feel qualified to make that decision on their behalf.
But isn't that what you're asking us to do, is to give a certain group of people a free pass to in just what they've done in the military? And I appreciate all that the military does, but I don't know that what they've done in the military as far as electrical or air conditioning, where it comes to them in a case and all they have to do is hook up. Don't you think that's exceeding what, as far as safety is concerned, for the public?
Well, again, I'm not an HVAC contractor. I've never done any work in the HVAC field, and it would be negligent for me to try to determine what the requirements should be. It's also not I'm not familiar with what the military personnel classifications would be. As I said earlier, there may be no exemptions that arise from this working group process, but if there are exemptions that can be applied, and we can get those folks into the skilled trades faster, even into their own business faster, then I think that would be appropriate. But only if the working group says it's appropriate.
Would you go for a couple more questions?
Sure.
In the bill, it says that spouses of military personnel that come to this state, that they would, if they qualified in their home state, that we would look at the qualifications and do a kind of a reciprocity on that?
If a person came to this state with a certification from another state and they were a military spouse, they would ask the same working group to review their home state's requirements, and if their home state requirements met or exceeded Georgia's, then they could ask for that exemption.
So that spouse would have taken a test, correct?
In that scenario, yeah, they would have had to have taken a test in another state in order for there to be a meeting or exceeding of our standards, because currently we require a test.
One final question. Would you be willing to sponsor legislation that would just waive the requirements for all licenses for military personnel, and maybe open it up for lawyers and nurses and pharmacists?
Well, to the first part of your question, no, I wouldn't be interested in sponsoring it for sponsoring legislation to open it up that widely, because we haven't demonstrated a need for all of the fields where we have licensures. And as to, I know this question has come up a couple times about lawyers, and I will tell you this, you know, in the legal profession there are ways to practice law in another state. You can get reciprocity with some states. You know, when I got out of the military, I could have gone to Kentucky and paid them a $1,500 fee and not had to take the bar exam again and be licensed to practice there. And you can do that in several states. So I don't think what we're talking about is really a reinvention of the will. I think it's a way to try to, again, streamline a process. It's a safe process. It's designed for our public safety. We don't want to short circuit that. We just want to make sure that we get the most efficient process to get these folks in the trades.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Gentlemen, the chair recognizes Representative Lindsay for a question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
For a question. I'm trying to get my arms around something that was previously asked to you. Do you think that someone who served their country in the military is asking for a free pass by this bill?
Representative Lindsay, I'm trying to be respectful to all the people who ask questions, and I would say that it is not a free pass to sign your life away for 8 years and go serve your country on active duty and in the reserve, and I don't appreciate that classification, but I take your point, and no, it is not a free pass.
Let me, will the gentleman further yield?
Yes, sir.
It's my understanding from reading the bill, we're not changing any of the qualifications for any of these certifications. We're simply allowing our state agencies to determine whether or not someone who is serving their country and has taken courses while serving their country and has actually been on duty doing this work could meet the standards of the state of Georgia. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And similarly, when it comes to assisting spouses of servicemen who are required to travel with their spouse to the various bases around the country and our own state, we're simply trying to make sure that these individuals are able to continue to serve their country and allow their spouse to earn a living based on trades that they have already learned in other states.
That is correct.
Finally, in regards to going from one state to another or from the military into civilian life, the laws of science regarding, for instance, someone's ability to work on HVAC doesn't change from Georgia to Tennessee, or for that matter, from the military to civilian, correct?
That's correct. And we do have some reciprocity with other states, so it's similar in concept to that. The difference being the Department of Defense doesn't have somebody in their office looking for ways to reciprocate with Georgia like another state would.
So basically all we're doing here, while we have reciprocity rights between states, we're simply setting up a system for reciprocity between the men and women of our armed services and our civilian boards in terms of licensing, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thanks, sir.
Chair recognizes Representative Pizzold for a question.
Rookie mistake. Thank you. Will the gentleman yield?
I will.
Is it not true that there is no such licensure requirement to actually be on a job and actually performing installs?
if the gentleman so states.
Chair recognizes Representative Rogers of the 29th for a question.
Gentleman Yield,
Yes, sir.
on line 27, it shows utility foreman.
Yes, sir.
I know they're from experience, if it's not true, that I need you to define what a utility foreman is. I'm not sure I know.
Okay. Utility foreman, air contractor, Class 1, journeyman plumber, and electrical contractor, Class 1, are all defined in Title 43. And I don't have the specific definition with me here at the well. I'll be glad to provide that for you when I come down.
Okay. We further yield?
Yes, sir.
For the past few years, I've had a lot of experience that is not true with the licensing boards, and they're very challenging to deal with at times. Is it not true? And on lines 30 and lines 38, it says immediate issuance. When you talk about immediate issuance, how much time are you talking about? Is it next day, 2 days, 3 days, 7 days, 30 days?
Well, the intention is that it be as soon as possible.
Okay. Will you further yield?
Yes, sir.
Presently, the boards down there that I've dealt with, is it not true? They're telling me it's taking 35 business days to get them processed. So, is it not true a military person can apply in the first 180 days that he's not in the military or still in the reserve can apply? My fear is it not true. We may be in a lag time other than immediate issuance. Has that been addressed at all?
I think you're really getting into an issue that may be better addressed with the Secretary of State's office and the way that they run their processes. I'm not really familiar with that, okay. And this bill certainly doesn't intend to address that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. If there are no further questions, I'll yield.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Chair recognizes Chair is going to suspend debate for a special invite presentation.
House will be in order. House will be at order. We're going to suspend here because we have a special guest with us today who has other commitments that he needs to be at across the hall and then away from the building. Chair recognizes Representative Teasley for an invite resolution. Representative Teasley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before I say a few words, I did want to ask, we have got a little video to play, just kind of commemorating Chipper Jones' career. So if we can dispense with the song, but please, if you'll play the video, please.
He's been the glue that's held us together. He's been Mr. Reliable in tough circumstances.
Chipper Jones is a Hall of Famer in his own right. A Hall of Famer all the way.
Chipper Jones, 21 years old. Slowly toward third, Sacramento can't get out of his glove, and Chipper Jones on the first pitch he sees in the major leagues has hit the mountain.
I'm thankful I've been able to watch him for the last 20 years because he's one of the best in the game. And those kind of players just don't come around too often.
Deep to right field. And with one swing of his bat. Chipper Jones has untied the game. It's 3-2 Atlanta.
I think that's Chipper Jones' first big league home run.
It is.
If you come through the Braves organization and you don't reach out for help from him, you're doing yourself a disservice because he's the smartest baseball guy that you'll ever be around.
He's the leader of our clubhouse, and everybody knows it. It's not something that's said, oh, he's the leader, but it's one of those things. It's like his presence is there, and everybody knows it when he speaks. People listen.
We're going to do it bigger and better, and whatever it takes to get the job done, we're going to do it.
It's great to have somebody in your clubhouse like that, and he does such a good job at it. And I'm glad he's the guy that we look up to.
Baldwin's 2-0 pitch. In the air toward the gap in left center field and carrying pretty well. And this ball is gone.
The way he carries himself, the way he runs, the way he fields, the way he throws. More importantly, he looks like a Atlanta Brave. That's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about Chipper Jones.
Crushed deep to right. And there it is. 400 career homers.
He was just one of the greatest guys and one of the greatest baseball players of all time.
Swing drive, right center field. The Braves have won
Big time value, especially the type of guy he is.
What a privilege it is to recognize Chipper Jones, not only for his career, but his commitment to the city of Atlanta and to the Atlanta Braves. As I think about his career accomplishments, I think about the World Series title in his rookie year, which should have been followed by a Rookie of the Year award that Hideki Nomo stole. I remember him carrying the team on his back in 1999 en route to winning the MVP award. Played on 11 division winners, 3 National League pennants. He was an 8-time All-Star. He's the only switch hitter in Major League Baseball who finished his career with a batting average over 300 and over 400 home runs. He's a very disciplined hitter, batted over 300 from both sides of the plate and had more career walks than strikeouts, which is an extremely rare accomplishment for a power hitter. And in his final season, he continued to play at a high level, providing a number of exciting moments for us fans. I don't know how many times I put on my Facebook page, Chipper, ! As he did a walk-off home run. But on a personal level, this last season had some special significance for me. And knowing how close you are to your father, I hope what I'm about to say is a blessing to you. As many of you know, my mother had died at the end of May. And a few weeks later, it was coming up to Father's Day, and my boys who were paging for me in the back today said, Dad, we want to take you and Granddaddy to the baseball game. We want to buy the family 4-pack. So my boys, with their first new job, their first job, they spent their money to take my dad and me to the Braves game. We had a good time that night. We lost, but we had a good time, and through no fault of his own, I might add. And a few days later, my dad calls and says, you know what, let's do that again. That was so much fun. Let's do that again, and let's go on July 3rd. They'll have a big fireworks display, so let's go again. This time it's my treat. So sure enough, we went. Had an even better time that night because not only did we win, but you had your first 5-for-5 night. And so it was a special night for us as a family to enjoy that. A few days later, my dad calls and says, hey, they're going to honor Chipper the last Friday, the last weekend series, and the last Friday. Let's go ahead and buy some tickets for that. So we bought 4 tickets. And a few weeks, and actually a week or 2 after that, my dad gets very sick. As many of you know, spends a few weeks in the hospital and then dies. And having grown up a Braves fan, remembering those 100 lost seasons, remembering when pitchers got lost on 285, growing up and watching the Braves was just something I always did with my family, and a special memory my dad and I shared. And so again, knowing how close you are, and you've mentioned several times how close you are to your father, I just want to say thank you. The memories my father and I had celebrating your last season on the field, something that I always remember. It's one of the last memories I have with my dad, so thank you. I want to give you Chipper Jones.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm very, I love the tomahawk chops. I'm making the transition now from player to fan, and it's not as difficult as I thought it was going to be. I got a chance to go down to spring training a couple weeks ago, and I'm not going to lie to you, I didn't have one single inkling to come back. My knees hurt just watching those guys, out there on the field. But, my time has come and gone. I'm extremely grateful to the city of Atlanta, to the state of Georgia, and Braves country all across the southeast United States, all across the United States in general, for having our backs the whole time, having my back through thick and thin. I thank each and every one of you. How ironic is it that the only channel that I got other than ABC, CBS, and NBC when I was a kid was TBS. So the only team that I grew up watching, wasn't necessarily a fan of them growing up because, like you said, they lost 100 games pretty much every year. But when I got the chance to make it to the big leagues or to make it into this organization, myself and a bunch of other young guys took it upon ourselves to carry the torch that was lit by the Terry Pendletons of the world, the David Justices, the Fred McGriffs, the Ronnie Gants, the Sid Breams, the Raphael Belliards. Bobby Cox and John Sherholz really started something special here in 1990, and it was up to us to take that torch and run with it. And I think we did a pretty good job of it. I think a lot of the naysayers out there say we only got one championship. Well, that's one more than a lot of other people got during that same amount of time, and we'll take it. And I seriously feel like if the Braves going forward give themselves enough opportunities, one of these years the ball bounce our way again, and we'll get another one. And we'll see fire engines carrying Atlanta Braves down Peachtree Street once again. So I hope to be a part of it in one way or the other. Maybe as a coach later on down the road, we'll see. But thank you very much. I'm very, very humbled by this honor today. This is really unexpected, and the last thing that you would expect to see a baseball player, here in the Capitol addressing each and every one of you. But I'm very flattered and very humbled. Thank you very much.
He's going to play it.
I know many of you want to greet Chipper, but I think his entourage is trying to get him a way to get him across the hall, so if you could assist us in that.
Members will cease all talking and take their chairs. We're back on the rules calendar with House Bill 188. The chair recognizes the chairman of Defense and Veterans Affairs to speak on House Bill 188. Representative Yates.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You think it's a little unfair asking me to follow that show?
Absolutely not.
Maybe I should open up by telling about dropping the can of gasoline on the German tank again. What do you think?
As the gentleman chooses.
Thank you for that rebound. I like that. I needed that. I honored the governor for taking up a cause that we all believe in, and I talked about it when we took this bill up, when the speaker gave me this, which is the most important bill of the year for our committee, I think, without any chance of being wrong. Some weeks ago, I went downtown and at the invitation of the governor, and he had a meeting with a bunch of business people, and the whole thing was to point out what our veterans learned when they were serving in wartime and peacetime, and how that could be used to get them back into the workforce. And at that time, he was emphasizing truck drivers, and there's a lot of those in the service. So he followed up with this bill, and when we first saw the bill, I said, well, you know, I'm a veteran, and I certainly, as the old saying goes, I'm all for veterans because I are one. And But I've seen bills come and go up here, and I determined that this bill would be heard enough times so that we would get out as many kinks as possible, because we don't want to come back and fix it next year and whatever. And after we had the first meeting, I decided that the best thing to do is to get all of the contractors, journeymen, and various people to meet with the governor's people. And I want to say how much I appreciate Representative Coomer working with us very diligently. And as I say, I said we can stipulate at the beginning that we're not going to throw any arrows at each other, because we'll stipulate that everybody in the committee and anybody in the meetings are for veterans. And I want to tell a personal story about how important that is to get a job for a veteran. People ask me, said, what did you think about, what did you worry about during the war? Except for one time when a German had his rifle on a bead on me after I'd been shooting him up pretty good, I was scared. But other than that, as I flew up and down the front lines and being shot at pretty regularly, that wasn't my main worry. I was a depression kid, and my main worry was, would I get a good job when I got home? As it turned out, that worked out okay. I spent 35 great years with Ford Motor Company. But to a veteran, I think that's the number one thing that we can do something about. This bill, I think, addresses a lot of things. It's not a perfect bill. I've never seen a perfect bill. In fact, have you? But I want to give a thanks to Council David Brundage, who he has all the patience in the world. As we went back and forth on this, he attended our meetings and kept us straight, and we made changes, and we had 4 meetings. I think the best one, we didn't have a meeting room, and it was in my little office over here, and I think as close as we were packed in there, that nobody could start a fight, so I thought that was our best meeting maybe. But we hashed it all out, and I have received scores of comments from plumbers, electricians, various journeymen saying that they had never seen a bill more thoroughly hashed out and give it a chance to speak up. And I think I can honestly say that we got it down to we have one representative out there who is not satisfied with it. And I think that's pretty close, and we have an amendment in here which you could consider. But I think that all in all, I just want to say that mainly that we did listen and listen and listen and take comments, and I believe it's a good bill, and I want to again thank the governor for doing what he did to bring this out so that we can help veterans any way we can. I want to answer one question that the presenter did not answer, and that was somebody asked a question about, do you have to have a license? Anybody can go to work under a master mechanic, under a master plumber, and all of those, because the one that gets a license, the master plumber that gets a license, he's responsible for everybody that works for him. And so people, veterans can get jobs, but they don't need a license to get a job. So that was when I answered that question. But I think that this is as good a bill as we could get and to take care of all the questions that came up. And so I'll leave it at that and be glad to answer any questions I can. I'm not a plumber, I'm not a heating man and all that, so I can't get into details like that, but I'll be glad to answer any question.
Chair recognizes Representative Lindsay for a question.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes.
First off, let me thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Both as a veteran and as a war hero from World War II. Let me ask you simply this, Mr. Chairman. For those of us who want to simply do more than paying lip service to the idea of supporting our troops, would this be one of the best bills for us to vote for?
I think so.
Thank you.
There are no more questions.
Thank you very much for your attention and patience, and I hope that you will support this bill. And as I say, I think the governor has done the right thing for us and led us in the right direction, and I was just honored to be a part of the process. Thank you.
Gentleman has yielded the well. The chair recognizes Representative Setzler to speak on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I'd like to rise and thank Representative Coomer for this very important bill that I stand to strongly support. I'd like to thank Chairman Yates for the hours he spent in committee considering a number of the issues, and again, I stand in strong support of HB 188. But as I stand in strong support of HB 188, I really stand in special support of not just passing HB 188 to support our veterans, but to allow us to fully accomplish the purpose for which this bill was filed in the first place, is getting it right, and getting it right for our veterans. I would ask you to consider before you, as you support HB 188 with me today, the Setzler-Smyre-Rice amendment that's before you. AM 213849. I've intended this amendment to be a friendly amendment. I understand some of the details of how things work here in the Capitol make that hard to do, but the purpose of the amendment is to fully complete the process of providing an accelerated pathway for veterans to get jobs in these professions while providing the kinds of protections that we all think are terribly important and we take very seriously as a General Assembly. I come before you today in support of this bill as a 9-year veteran myself. My last assignment in the Army was as a truck company commander in Fort Stewart, where a large percentage of my soldiers in my company would leave my company, go into the private sector, into a very technically particular business of long-haul truck driving. I understand the ways in which military training does and sometimes does not correspond with the civilian sector. And it's to that point I want you to pay particular attention today as you support the Setzler-Smyre-Rice amendment and then ultimately support passage of HB 188. HB 188 is intended to provide a fast-track licensure process for electricians, plumbers, HVAC contractors, and utility and general contractors. What this is about is not to get them just to work. Chairman Yates was spot on, and I want everyone in this chamber to hear this. To get a job in these businesses, you do not require a license. People can leave the military and work for an existing HVAC contractor without a license. They're working under the license of the plumber, electrician, HVAC contractor, or general contractor. What this bill is about is giving them the level of licensure to own their own business and to run the show as a technical leader in their profession. That's what licensure is about. I'll say that again. This is about licensure to make people technical leaders in their profession where they're able to own their own plumbing business, electrical business, HVAC business, or contracting business. It's not about getting a job. They can get jobs today if we do nothing here. But because it's important for our veterans to be able to come out of the military and be leaders in professions in which they're competent and they've demonstrated excellence and competency, HB 188 is a terribly important bill for us to pass today with the appropriate safety controls. In essence, what HB 188 does, it establishes a committee. It has some government, some entities from the executive branch and the licensing boards that come from industry. You've got the industry experts who are volunteers who serve on the board. They come together and provide a process to allow folks to have their military experience considered in full licensure. It eliminates bureaucracy and accelerates a timeline that in some cases would require people leaving the military to spend another 4 years in the private sector profession before they could then get a license and run their own shop. This process of providing an accelerated timeline is terribly important if we have the appropriate controls in place to ensure that they're competent to be the technical leaders that we expect HVAC contractors, plumbers, electricians, and contractors to be. The problem with HB 188 without the Setzler-Smiley-Rice amendment is it does not require the individual specific veteran to prove their technical competence in their chosen field. I want to be very careful, and I would ask you to consider lines 30 through 38 of the bill. I won't read through it. But the process that's set forth here is a permissive process that allows the panel that's discussed here today to consider the licensure, the experience of a specific career field within a service, and have all folks of that same skill level or within that same career field to be treated the same way. For example, imagine a staff sergeant in the U.S. Air Force with a 3 Echo, 1 X-ray, 1 career field. That's HVAC and refrigeration specialist. What this contemplates, without the amendment, is that our Governor's Office of Workforce Development, will with some other technical resources around the state, perhaps from the technical college system or otherwise, will look at the experience and the training of all folks within that career field, and will establish that if you're successful in this career field, that everybody at the same rank and level of success will have the same chance for licensure. Treating everybody in the career field and seniority the same. What's the fatal flaw of that? The fatal flaw of that is that all folks are not created equal. We know that individuals coming out of the military with a staff sergeant rank from the same MOS do not have the same ability to come into your house or to my house and set up an electrical system or to put in an HVAC system or to perform plumbing services. Give you an example. I want you to imagine there's 3 people with the same MOS. They're all staff sergeants in the Air Force. They all started out at Robins Air Force Base, Georgia. One person, after their first year in the Army, showed a propensity for management and office leadership. And this person was put in the dispatch office where they ran the operations of the organization but never were out there in buildings actually installing systems and doing the technical side of the job. I want you to imagine another person who is actually going around the base, in base housing, installing HVAC systems every day, day in, day out. Those folks will come out after 5 years of experience, have the same level of success on their efficiency reports, but will have dramatically different levels of experience. Friends, we can't allow our veterans to come out who've met the requirements we've put before them. We can't set them up for failure to take on a business responsibility that they've not been technically verified as prepared to take on. We owe our veterans more than to set them up for failure by giving them full licensure and dubbing them as technical leaders in a profession where they might need some remedial training to be prepared for full licensure. That's all the amendment does, friends. The amendment sets up a process whereby the Technical College System of Georgia, who educates people today around the states in these professions, to set up a test, and the test will be required before full licensure can be granted. That's what the amendment does. You'll see some references here to a diagnostic or training process. There are dollars today, the VA funds to train veterans for their job after the military. There are VA dollars in the system today to do that. WIA, Workforce Investment Act dollars, fund our technical college system today to do these exact things. Friends, the dollars are there. We can't set our veterans up for failure by giving them this accelerated licensure process without verifying that every single one of them is prepared to be a technical leader in their profession. Friends, I don't want to belabor the point. The hour is already late. But I will tell you that as I urge you to support the amendment, let's ensure that our veterans demonstrate their competency. We have a TCSG program in place that the technical college system works already with the executive branch, but they have national standards they have to maintain to make sure that every one of our veterans is competent to do their job. One last thing I'll close with. The issue is raised with reciprocity from other states. The difference between setting up an HVAC system in a big green package unit laying in the dirt in Iraq that pumps cold air into a tent is dramatically different than going into your house and my house and setting up a commercial furnace that with the proper carbon monoxide venting that's done to code in our residential neighborhoods. Dramatically different. Friends, we're taking nothing away from our veterans who've served us in combat zones around the world to suggest that the military experience, working with military equipment, the recognition that the nature of their experience is very different, and that if they can demonstrate competency on civilian systems, they get licensed. But until they've done so, we can't set them up for failure by dubbing them as being technical leaders in areas where they may need a little bit more development before they're finally licensed. We can accelerate this process. We can cut this down. We can cut down on the bureaucracy, as I know this bill will do. But let's ensure there's a final test required for every technical leader coming out of the military to ensure that our people are safe and we give them a meaningful way forward to be leaders in their profession. Mr. Speaker, be glad to yield for questions.
Chair recognizes Chairman Sims for a question.
Chairman Yield.
I do.
Friendly question. As you know, I support this bill, and I support the veterans, and I support your amendment. And I also thank you for your service. And as you know, I served in the military also. This is just a question I'd ask you. I am a military engineer, but you would not let me come wire your house, I'm sure. And I wouldn't want to do that because, even though I've been to the advanced course, basic course, and the CAS Cube, it doesn't matter. This is to be the technical type of person to get this licensure. It would take a license to do it, and you would want to be tested or have someone with that kind of testing behind it. I applaud your amendment. I think it's a great thing.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Parsons for a question.
Thank you, Speaker. Gentleman yield.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Isn't it true, first of all, I share some of your concerns, and referencing Chairman Sims' question, isn't it true that there are many MOSs in the military that would not line up with civilian jobs?
Correct.
That's correct. However, these particular MOSs that are listed in this bill, it would seem to me, isn't it true, that they would line up very well with the jobs. But my question to you is, you mentioned several times that this would allow them to get a license, which would allow them to go into business, which would set them up for failure. Do all the people who get licenses in these fields, do they all set up their own businesses, or aren't they looking for jobs?
To the gentleman's question, a license is not required of someone leaving the military who wants to get in the electrical profession. You can go work under a master electrician in a master electrician's company today without what's contemplated in this bill and get a job and make good money.
Right.
The licensure we're talking about is being the leader of a company, the technical director and licensed professional that hires people underneath them and is overall responsible for that company. It's not a worker. It is the technical leader and director for a company. That's what's contemplated in this bill. And that level of competence does require experience in the civilian sector in the kinds of systems folks will be working with every day in the civilian world, not those special military systems that are made for the military.
Well, does gentleman yield, just to try to make sure I understand this? I mean, is it true then that everybody who gets this license is looking and does in fact start their own company? I mean, don't some of these people actually have the license and therefore make them better qualified and more likely to get a job with somebody that's already out there? I mean, the way you're saying it, anytime a person gets a license in these, they create a company. I mean, isn't it true that they may very well just be, they would use that license as an advantage to get a good job?
That's why this bill is so important to pass. The challenge is, without ensuring that they've got the technical competence to run their own company, we can't set them up for failure. I've gotten calls, and some of our members have gotten calls from former military members who went through the long process to become licensed, who've called us and said, you know what, when I came out of the military, I wasn't ready to do this. I'm a successful contractor today, but there's no way when I came out of the military as a technical sergeant was I ready to take on the responsibility of having a license. This process is very well intentioned. As long as we make them demonstrate through a test they can perform on civilian systems, that's all this is saying, is they demonstrate they can perform. It may take them a week to demonstrate that, but we've got to make sure that they've proven they can perform on civilians' electrical, mechanical, and plumbing systems before we put them in charge of a company.
Well, one more question, if I may. Isn't it true that that's how we actually set these veterans up for failure, by requiring them to take tests that doesn't necessarily match what they have done, but doesn't necessarily match what they will have to do when they get the license? I mean, that'd be my question. I think, that's what veterans run into. They come out and then they have to take some kind of a test, or they're put in some kind of environment, even though they can do the job, but because of the way this thing's set up, then they end up not getting the job, and they are set up for failure.
Chairman Parsons, the problem we have today is we have a bureaucratic system that takes years to get through a process. That's wrong. We all agree on that. That's wrong. We're trying to put an end to that bureaucratic 4-year process to get licensed, to allow a committee to shrink that process down, and if someone can demonstrate competence, they get their license very quickly. But without demonstrating that, we have no level of confidence they can be successful as we need them to be.
Chair recognizes Representative Smith of the 125th for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Is it not true that each respective military branch has base and/or post housing?
That's fact.
Is it also not true that in this base and/or post housing, the HVAC, the electrical work, all of the civil engineering work is done by certified military personnel?
Only a couple branches still do that. Army bases are not run that way. They're run by that work's done by civilians and contractors. But to your point, the services that do have those folks will likely have some people who are competent to do this, and they'll very quickly get their license. But in branches that don't have folks in civilian housing, they're not going to have people that can do this. They've been very successful maybe in an overseas environment in Iraq and Afghanistan, but they're not doing it in our neighborhoods. So there's going to be a great disparity between the kinds of people you're talking about and the remainder. And that's why there's got to be a process to not treat everybody the same, because there are dramatic differences in experience even within the same career field.
Were you Army?
I was Army, yes, sir.
So is it not true that perhaps Navy and Air Force probably has a uniquely stratified technical system that's superior to what you probably were involved in?
Well, I'm glad you asked the question. Since 2005, I've been a facilities engineering consultant on Air Force bases around the world, and have hired folks to do a lot of this work. I've developed a tremendous amount of competence in this specific area since my military service. So I would submit the day I came out, I would agree with you, but since then I've learned a lot more than I did when I left.
Well, will the gentleman still yield?
Yes, sir.
I'm speaking because I think that we need to get a point of clarity. I'm an former Air Force aviation technician and air traffic controller. The military has the best schools in the world. Is that not true? And we're simply talking about these fields where we have experienced people that have come through these experienced schools first, so that no one is thinking that we're trying to give jobs to infantrymen and artillerymen first that don't have the skill, but actually people that have the skill set. This is not set up to ensure that someone will fail, but ensure that we get the best and the brightest first, to have them symmetrically assimilate into the civilian workforce. Is that not true?
The gentleman's time is expiring.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I say we stand with our veterans. Our veterans are very well trained in what they're trained to do, which is to provide services for the military. Let's make sure they're equally trained to be successful in their civilian lives by supporting the amendment to HB 188.
Chair recognizes Representative Williams to speak on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the great welcome from the whip. One of the things, and I want everybody to take this in the spirit it's given, but this debate does not help us in the sight of Georgians. My goodness, you realize how long we have debated a bill simply to help veterans. I've passed out budgets of almost $20 billion quicker than this. And we're debating a jobs bill all afternoon. Come on. All I got to say is this. The boards have been set up. Thank you, Representative Comer, for bringing this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for supporting this bill. There's no perfect bill that comes out of this House or the Senate. The military people that we're talking about helping, and I know a little something about them because there's not another district in this state that has a higher percentage of military people and military veterans than District 168 that I represent. 70% of my district is either directly or indirectly connected to the military. The most disciplined and best workers in this country are former military people. And when they come out, all this does is tip our hats. Thank you for the service you have given. Thank you for keeping it safe while we get to sit home. Thank you for making this a better world to live in. It will work. The boards are set up. We'll do the vetting. It'll happen. I trust a veteran to work at my house. I have no reservations. Now we can sit here the rest of the evening and come up with 50 ways why this bill should fail or why an amendment should be added. I'm looking for one way to move this one down the road, help some veterans get some real jobs, and get off of the delay. With that, Madam Speaker, I yield the well.
The gentleman has yielded the well. The chair recognizes Chairman Earhart to speak on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I've heard a lot of debates. I want to mention something that Representative Lindsay tried to get to the other day. There's a gentleman down here who used to grooverize things. And he used to come down here and he'd talk about catfish amendments. And that's what they were. They were catfish. And the reason he did is because you nail that little catfish to the tree and then you tell him, hold still, I'm going to gut you. That's what he used to say. And that's what this amendment, ladies and gentlemen, is. This guts this, and that's what it's all about. You can say all the things in the world that you want. It's a catfish amendment. Let's just call it what it is. This is about helping our veterans. Representative Yates wondered if he could follow just a Hall of Fame baseball player. Representative Yates is an American hero. Everybody has to follow him. Ladies and gentlemen, let's read what it says in the bill. Let me direct you to lines 31 and 32 and lines 49. It clearly states that the licensing board, the same board, ladies and gentlemen, that gives everybody else in the state this license, whether it's one of these plumbers, whether it's an HVAC contractor, the license to do this. And here's the key. It says they have to determine whether it meets or exceeds, just as the gentleman over here said. Yes, there are military individuals that work on very significant HVAC systems. I trust the guy who's doing the Pentagon's HVAC, He probably has a little bit more difficult job than the guy that's working on my house. How about some of the very technically difficult nuclear installations that the military runs? Those aren't all civilian contractors. As a matter of fact, generally they're not. They don't have the security clearance to work here. Again, let's go back to what the bill says. The bill says that the same people that are given reciprocal ability to practice and get a license in this state to contractors out of Alabama, now are you sure they're getting the same training? Is that test as good? How about the state of New York? You got to wonder what the criterion is there. If you've got a gun in your truck and you're a plumber, you probably don't get to work in New York. But this same board evaluates whether or not those particular individuals have the capacity to do this. They're the same ones that are going to evaluate whether the military personnel have that ability too. What, are you going to insult them and say they don't have the ability to do this by adding an amendment like this to go through it? Let me talk about this amendment in another way. I happen to chair the subcommittee that puts the money in TCSG. Ladies and gentlemen, I heard something about the VA, but guess what? I don't have a letter on my desk that says the VA is going to pay for this new licensing, this new examination, this new course, and all those other things. I don't really feel like going back and adding this mandate to the TCSG now that we've already gone through the budget. And by the way, they took a $27 million cut. You've probably heard that. They took a 10% cut, more than any other department. And you're going to pass this amendment and add that to them? Support the veterans who come back. Nobody on this licensing board is going to let somebody who just performed truck maintenance in the military qualify for a license. But these are reasonable, rational individuals who are members of the industry who are going to evaluate this and say, yeah, you worked on the Pentagon. You don't have to wait 4 years to experience your American dream. You've been fighting for ours. Let's fight for them. Ladies and gentlemen, pass the bill. Kill the amendment. Thank you very much. I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. For what purpose does Representative Setzler rise?
Madam Speaker, I just had a question for the gentleman in the well. Please yield the well.
Chairman of Defense and Veteran Affairs has waived his time and ceded it to the author of the bill, Representative Coomer. Chair recognizes Representative Coomer for the closing.
Madam Speaker, I think you've just made reference to the time of day, so I'm going to be very quick. I'll just say on the amendment, it actually is anti-veteran. If you look at the requirements, it would require additional testing for veterans. So if you're a veteran, you got to take an extra test under this amendment. It's an unfunded mandate, as Chairman Earhart referenced to an agency that's already in the hole on the budget. And while I accept that there may be a difference between the way you put an air conditioning system in Afghanistan and the way you do it in Alma, the bottom line is that's not the minutia we get into in this bill. We're asking this working group to get into that minutia. They're the ones they're composed of the people who already make the rules. We're asking them to make the rules and make them adjust appropriately for military veterans. I will just say this. I know, as a veteran, my father's a Vietnam-era Marine. My brothers are both Army combat veterans. I spent 4 years on active duty. We love our country. We love Georgia. And we know Georgia loves us. We want to show that through this bill. This bill is good for Georgia. It's good for veterans, and it's good for skilled trades. Please vote no on the amendment, yes on the bill. Thank you.
Gentleman has yielded the well. For what purpose does Representative Setzler rise? Gentleman waives. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. There is an amendment, AM 213849. Clerk will read the amendment.
Representative Setzler of the 35th and others offer the following amendment. Amend the House Committee on Defense and Affairs. Substitute House Bill 188. This amendment was printed and placed on your desk earlier today. Upper right-hand corner, AM 213849.
For what purpose does Representative Pruitt rise?
Madam Speaker, under the Mike Choka's House Rule 133, I ask to be excused, please.
The gentleman is excused. For what purpose does Representative Setzler rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Madam Speaker.
State one inquiry.
Isn't it true that this is not, in fact, an unfunded mandate, that there are workforce investment dollars that fund everything here? They do it today. They will continue to under the amendment, as do VA dollars. And isn't it further true, Madam Chair? I know you just asked for one.
If the gentleman so states.
And isn't it further true, Madam Chairman, that this amendment is the only way this legislature can be sure there's an individual test to ensure that an individual is competent to do this, as opposed to being treated as a group where all people of the same rank and MOS are treated the same?
The gentleman so states. For what purpose does Representative Barr rise?
Pursuant to Rule 133, I request to be withdrawn.
The gentleman is excused. Is there any objection to adopting the amendment? There is objection. Does the gentleman move? The gentleman moves. All those in favor of adopting the amendment will vote yes. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the adoption of the amendment. The yeas were 100. On the adoption of the amendment, the yeas were 65, the nays were 103. The amendment is adopted.
No, the amendment is failed. Can you put
Okay. The amendment has failed. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair, as amended by the House. As not amended by the House. The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted and unamended. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of the bill. The yeas were 167, the nays were 2. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed.
Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 123. House Bill 123.
House Bill 123 by Representative Lindsay, 54th, a bill to be entitled Act amending Title 20 relating to elementary, secondary education, so enact the Parent and Teacher Empowerment Act to provide for petitions to convert existing schools to charter schools or impose turnaround models. Bill has been for the House Committee on Education. The committee recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Bill is being read today for the third time.
Chair recognizes the Majority Caucus Whip, Representative Lindsay, to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try to move this bill along a little quicker perhaps than the last one, because I do know that we have had intense discussions on this bill in both caucuses and among ourselves, and I think folks have a pretty good idea of what it does. Let me just briefly outline what House Bill 123 does. Right of assembly.
and right to petition your government. It's found in the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It's found in paragraph 9, section 1, article 1 of the Georgia Constitution. What this bill does, plain and simply, is it puts teeth in the right of petition, because it says that not only do you as a parent or you as a teacher have a right to petition your local school board regarding changes you want to make in your local school, it says that the local school board must actually take a look at your concerns and decide whether or not they have merit or not. In other words, a local school board cannot simply take your concerns and throw them in the dustbin and ignore them. It must look the parents and the teacher in the eye and say, yes, your concerns have merit and we're going to vote it up, or no, we disagree with your concerns and we're going to vote it down. That at its core is what this bill is all about, putting teeth in a fundamental right that exists for all of our people, and that is the right to petition their government for redress. Now, in detail, what HB 123 does is simply this. If parents want to petition their local school board to convert their traditional school into what's called a conversion charter school, which is still a public school, which still must serve as the same geographic area as the traditional school, the parents can sign a petition, and if a majority of them wish to do so, that petition is then taken to the local school board, and the local school board has to act on that petition. If they simply have 50% plus one person, the local school board can reject that petition by a majority vote. But if over 60% of the parents say, we want to change this from a traditional public school into a conversion public school, then the school board can only reject it by 2/3. Similarly, what the bill also does is say to teachers, if you are working in a low-performing school, and that's already been defined under Georgia law, and you believe that the problem is with the management of that school, you can, by secret ballot or by petition, but usually by secret ballot, the teachers can petition their local school board to change the operation of that school. In other words, it gives the teachers an opportunity to go to their local school board and demand changes in a school that is low performing. Parents will also have a similar right to do just that. The avenues that can be taken by the parents or the teachers in terms of changing the management of that local school system are the same avenues or the same criteria that the Office of Student Achievement already has under Georgia law. In other words, we already can do this from the top down. What we're simply now doing is allowing parents and teachers to do it from the bottom up. Now, a couple of things I think are very important, because there's some folks who've been a little bit confused on this, and I want to make sure this is clearly understood. This remains local. We're not setting up a system in which anyone can bypass the local school system in regards to how a traditional school is to operate in the future. The local school board built it, the local school board funded it, and the local school board will ultimately have the decision making as to whether or not either the teacher or the parent's application to change the operation of the school occurs. That needs to be clearly understood. Now, I dropped this bill originally last year, but I wanted to wait, as well as the other sponsors of this bill, wanted to wait a year because two things. Number one, we did not want it to get confused with the Charter School Amendment, which dealt with an entirely different situation. But we also wanted to listen to the teachers, we wanted to listen to the school boards, we wanted to listen to the school superintendents, and most importantly, we wanted to listen to the parents. And we did that. I cannot think of any organization that came to us in the course of the last year with concerns about how the bill would operate, and that group did not come away with at least some of, if not most of their concerns being taken care of. That's why the Georgia School Board Association is neutral on this bill. That's why the Georgia Association of School Superintendents is neutral on this bill. That's why the two major teacher organizations in this state are neutral on this bill, because we listened to them, because we took into account their concerns and we tried to incorporate it. That process is continuing, quite frankly, even to today. You will have on your desk an amendment by my good friend from Atlanta, Margaret Kaiser. It's a good amendment. I purposefully brought this bill to the floor as modified open because I wanted this discussion to continue. And Representative Kaiser came to me with an amendment. This is a good amendment, and I'm going to ask in a few minutes for you to vote for that amendment as well as my bill. Let me close by simply telling to me one of the most scary things that I heard through this process in committee. And that's when one of the rare opponents to this bill came and testified and said that we should not allow parents to have this much power. We should not allow parents to be able to petition the local school board for a change in how the schools are operating. Because after all, the professionals should be left to make this decision. Well, folks, I believe in my professionals in this state. I believe in the teachers. I believe in the school superintendents. I believe in other education professionals. I believe that they should be part of the process in terms of deciding whether or not a particular petition should be accepted or not. And I'm confident that my local school boards will do just that. But woe be us if we should ever come to a point in public education in which we refuse to listen to the concerns of the parents. That is why HB 123 is so important. I've sat on the House Education Committee now through 9 sessions, chaired by my good friend Brooks Coleman. And if there's one thing I've learned through 9 sessions, in addition to serving as the chair of Education Appropriations, if there's one thing that I have learned is that one of the vital components to a successful school's operation is parental involvement in a child's education. Without it, all education reform efforts will eventually fail. What this bill simply does is it brings the parents to the table where the decisions regarding their children's education are going to be discussed. And their concerns are going to be heard, and their elected officials are going to decide whether or not those concerns have merit. That's all this bill does at its core. Mr. Speaker, I'll be happy to yield for any questions.
You do have some questions.
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes the minority leader of the House, Representative Abrams, to your left for a question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
Yes.
If I can direct your attention to lines 53 through 58 to start. Under the language here, does it set a quorum for the number of parents who have to actually attend this public meeting?
I believe it does. I believe it requires that I believe what the language does and what the language was intended to do as we set forth in committee, that it be a majority of the parents in the school, not simply the majority of the folks showing up. I know that there are some folks who are worried about the language. This morning someone came to me and I said, I believe that that's what it says. But if anyone here is concerned about whether or not that language is clear enough, please present an amendment to me. I asked for that at 11 o'clock this morning or 11:30 this morning. So far, I haven't seen an amendment. My assurance to you is this. I think the language is clear. If there is continued concern over that language, I'll be happy to work further in the Senate to amend it, because that is the intent as we passed it out of the House Education Committee. And like I said, I've waited for about 6 hours for someone to offer an amendment on that, but I'm still willing to work with you or anyone else who feels that the language is not as clear as I think it should be, and I'll work with you through the Senate.
Okay. Would you yield for further question?
Yes.
If you'll look at line 156, is public charter management organization a defined term? And if not, can you explain what
I
that
believe it is a term that is used elsewhere in the charter school law underneath Georgia. I don't know if specifically, as I'm standing here, whether or not it in and of itself is a defined term, but it is a term that is used elsewhere in the law as well.
Can you explain what the term refers to?
It basically is a management company that can be hired by the board of a charter school to actually manage the charter school.
So when we say, what I'm trying to clarify is when you say a public charter management company, is this a publicly traded? Is it a nonprofit? Are there constraints on what constitutes a public charter?
Public is intended to refer to the fact that we're dealing with public schools.
Okay.
But like I said, it's used elsewhere in the law. We'll take a look at that as well, should there be any confusion. But that's what the bill. We simply borrowed that language from other areas of the law regarding charter schools.
Okay. My last question would be, and just to clarify, I appreciate your willingness, because the concern that I have when I read this language together, under the current construction of this bill, if you had 100 parents in a school and you had a public meeting, but there's no public notice required, it's just a public meeting that's required, you have 30 parents who show up. Yeah. Under the terms of this bill, if 18 of those parents voted for closure of the school or voted for conversion of the school, that would meet the 60% threshold. Is it not true that once you reach the 60% threshold, it would, by automatic purview, unless a two-thirds majority of the school board said no, you could have a minority of the majority of the people in that school system actually lead to conversion to charter or to the closure of a school?
As I stated earlier, I believe that the language says something different than you do. I believe that it requires an actual majority of the parents to actually vote on it, not simply the ones that show up at a meeting. I believe that's how the language was constructed. I know that was the intent in Education Committee. I know that some folks have tried to construe it differently. And I offered to allow them to make an amendment at any time today, and I would sign on to that amendment if someone believed that the language was not as clear as I think it is. That offer still exists after today, even though no amendment was offered, because that is the intent within that language.
Thank you.
Do you further yield?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes the chairman of the House Transportation Committee, Chairman Roberts, to your right for a question.
Yes, sir.
Do you yield?
Yes.
Kind of on the same lines as the minority leader. 67 and 68, does that take into the same? I mean, if you've got only a few teachers that show up, I mean, are they able to, in other words, do the same thing as we're looking at over here on these other lines?
No, if you combine it with the earlier language, I believe it still requires a majority. But like I said earlier, I offered to, if the language was not as clear as it needed to be, I offered to support an amendment that would clarify that. No amendment was offered, but if there is continued concern about that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be more than happy to clarify that in the Senate, since no offer of an amendment was made today.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I know there are other folks who are set to talk on this bill. The hour is late. This is an issue that has been bantied about by this General Assembly for quite some time. So I'm going to yield at this time and allow other people to speak. And if necessary, I'll be happy to come back during the chairman's time and speak further. But I do ask for your favorable consideration of this bill. Once again, we have worked very hard. The House Education Committee, the authors of the bill, and other organizations to try to take in the various concerns that were raised by this bill, to look at, quite frankly, what other states have done and figure out what worked and what didn't work, and to, more than anything else, to make sure that not only can parents petition for change, but their petition will be heard and considered by their local governments, which is a centerpiece of a free state. Thank you.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Chair recognizes Representative Stovall to speak to the bill. Representative Stovall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and the members of the House. I come today in support of House Bill 123. Some of you who are parents or have been parents understand the frustration of making your concerns known to the principal, to the superintendent, and finally to the school board, but to no avail. You follow the chain of command set up by the local school board. You volunteer and you encourage other parents because you believe you can make a difference. This bill is for those parents who want the best education and are willing to make the sacrifices necessary to ensure the quality of instruction. This bill is for those parents who have been told they are messy or troublemakers. This bill is for those parents who believe that the children are our future. We should teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. This bill is for those parents who believe the employees of the school are getting paid to do a job. This bill is for those parents who now can demand the school board to give them a response on how the school will be improved or convert the school to give parents a choice. This parent standing before you now has had the experience with traditional public schools as well as public charter schools. There is no one size that fits all, but what we have now fits none. Granted, there are traditional schools which are being accountable. Then this bill does not apply to them. One thing is for sure, if a local school system consistently underperforms, it is not shut down immediately, but allowed to continue for years to create a burden to our society. These students are not becoming productive citizens. Let's play a game of myths or facts, because apparently to some of my colleagues, education is a game. I won't say any names because I don't want to get censored. So let me clear up a few myths that have been spreading along the halls of this Capitol. Myth number one, charter schools are not held to the same standards as traditional public schools. Fact, charter schools can and have been closed much faster because they have not abided by their petition or contract. Myth number two, like in Florida, charter management organizations will abandon the charter schools and our poor little kids will suffer by not having a school. Fact, I have not heard of this happening. Charter schools have existed since 1996 in Georgia. Myth number three, charter management organizations are being paid a lot of money. Fact, all charter schools don't utilize management organizations, and the ones which do can't pay more than 3% to those companies. What is the difference in the money received by management organizations and the millions of dollars that are paid to private companies for books, supplies, construction, and technology? Isn't this taxpayers' money also? In my opinion, this bill doesn't have enough teeth. It shouldn't limit the appeal process to the local school board. If there's a student population of 500, then 250 parents will need to sign the petition. If 250 parents can be assembled, then that is cause enough to convert the school and terminate everybody. Vote yes to start education reform. After all, the parents are the customers. I'm finished. No, I'll stay here for questions.
You have 2 or 3 questions, it appears. Do you care to yield?
Yes, I will.
Chair recognizes Minority Caucus Whip Representative Hughley. Did you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Does the General Lady yield?
Yes, ma'am.
The question was actually for the Majority Whip, but since he's gone, I'm going to ask it to you, and maybe he'll answer it later, or if you can't answer it. On the first page, around about line 56, when we talk about giving a 2 weeks notice for this public meeting, who gives that notice, and in what format does that notice go out?
Well, from what I have read, there's nothing specific here, but even with giving those 2 weeks notice, that still goes back to what I said earlier. If you're able to still get, the key is that the 50% or more of the parents that you're able to get together. And a lot of schools, as you know, I'm sure in your district, it's very hard to even get 20, 30, maybe 100 parents. So that's why I go back to my initial saying of, if you're able to get 250 parents, then that's enough if you're able to get them to sign a petition, and they're verified, because in the particular bill it says they have to be verified. So going back to your question you asked earlier about the notice, it's not stated, I don't see it in here.
Well, okay, that's my only concern there, and also later on about the 2 weeks advance notice for the employees when they get to do this. That's not clarified in this bill. I also want to just ask you, and I'm sure you would agree, that successful schools offer genuine opportunities for parents to be involved, not only on a one-time but on a continuing basis. What do you think is the ongoing involvement of the parents in the management of these schools if they are turned around or converted?
Well, like I said earlier, as a parent that's really been very instrumental in volunteering at both my children's school, I think if you have parents that feel strongly enough about those schools and those changes that need to be made, they're going to be there in the long run. Because at the end of the day, every parent wants to make sure and ensure that their child is getting the proper education.
And one last question, and I have kids in school now myself, and my biggest pet peeve is they put a message board notice, and you got to pass by the school. If you don't pass by the school, you don't see the notice. And so I want to make sure we're not doing that here. The other thing is, for schools outside the metro area where there is only one school, I see parents have the opportunity, if the school is converted, that they can choose not to go to that school. What would be the option of parents who, there's only one school in the county and the school is converted and they don't like that, then what's their options?
Well, from what I did read in the bill, and I could stand corrected, but what I did read in the bill, if the school is a Title I school, then the school itself will provide transportation.
Thank you. Good job for your
All
first
right,
time in the well.
Do you further yield?
Yes, I do.
Chairman Dollar, not. Chair recognizes Chairman Setzler for a question to your right.
Does the lady yield?
Yes, I do.
With, if there's a parent in a school, or there's a set of parents in a school where the school's failing, and the parents don't have the financial means to leave that neighborhood and move somewhere where the schools work, today what options do those parents have?
Today, initially through the No Child Left Behind, when it came down to the situations or problems that were in the school presently, the one thing is, let me back up. If you're in the school, if a parent is in a school and the school is not performing, then according to beforehand with the No Child Left Behind, they did have an option of being able to go to another school. And I think with this particular bill, because, like I said, it's a low-performing school, and a lot of parents now, and that's kind of one of the reasons why charter schools have come up on the rise so frequently and so in large numbers, is because parents are not feeling like they have a choice on where their child can go. One particular school where I was board chair at, These parents drove their kids to school every day. There was no local transportation. They drove them to school and they came back at the end of the school to pick them up. So one thing I do know is where there's a will, there's a way when it comes down to educating our kids.
Does the lady yield?
Yes.
Do you believe if there's a family that lives in an area where there's no charter school or no choice today, that this bill gives parents who don't have the financial means to afford a private school perhaps, do you believe this bill gives them a mechanism to have a school choice and determine more about their kids' education?
Yes, because what it does allow now, beforehand, if you go before the local school board, a lot of times your issues that you have, they don't have to answer them. So what this particular bill does, in my opinion, it now forces the school board to have to answer to those questions and also come up with answers on how they're going to improve those particular schools.
Do you believe this General Assembly ought to provide means for families who aren't wealthy enough to provide to exercise choice options? Do you believe this General Assembly ought to be friendly and provide means for parents who don't have financial means to make those kind of choices?
Yes, I do.
Do you believe this bill does that?
Yes.
Thank you for your support.
All right. I yield the well, Mr. Speaker.
Lady has yielded the well. Chair recognizes Representative Morgan to speak on the bill. Representative Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. I rise in support of House Bill 123. I am not only a co-sponsor of this bill, but I come really this evening as a parent. If you would ask around this room, what is parental engagement, we would have a whole lot of answers. It would range from everything to getting your child to school on time, attending parent conferences, PTA meetings, participating on the school council, and the list goes on. But what if we had the ultimate parent engagement, where parents could decide how the school was actually managed? What if parents whose kids are stuck in low-performing schools, who attend every PTA meeting, serve on school councils, and make recommendations to the principal and the board only for it to fall on deaf ears and still get no resolution for their child? If it were your child, how long would you wait? How long would you accept that pat on the head and assurance that someday things are gonna change? And as a parent, there is not one decision more important to me than having Layla in the right school with the right culture. I couldn't imagine sending her to a failing school. But if I were like some of the parents in this state who don't have any other option, I would want every tool possible to make it better. HB 123 is simply a tool for parents who want to use it. It's simply an opportunity to activate mechanisms to the state that are already available to the state, now available to parents. And so I want to talk for a moment about what this bill is not. This bill is not a ploy for a corporate takeover. It's not a way to divide parents and teachers and principals. It's not a part of a conspiracy to destroy public education. It's not a ploy to bring more charter schools. In fact, if you look at the options available to parents in this bill, it's just the opposite. This bill gives parents who want their local public school to work for their children some power, a voice, to help decide what happens at their child's school. Of the 6 options, only one of them has to do with choosing another school. The rest of them are reform models that change their existing school. These are parents who are choosing to stay, who are committed to the school and want it to work for their kids. And some detractors would say, well, we're doing too much, too fast, we're pushing too many reforms. And I can appreciate that. If this were a factory and we were making widgets, I would say we could move as slow as we wanted. Except we're talking about kids. Kids and parents who only get one shot at education. They don't have 10 years for us to take it slow. They have right now. If you are a parent or you've been faced as a parent with ensuring that you're giving your child the best education, you feel the sense of urgency of now. Not in a decade, not next year, not for some of us, not next week, but right now. We need every tool available to us, and we need them now. This is the only option. This is not the only option that will solve our challenges, but parent and teacher empowerment is simply one tool to do so. And so I want to share a story. one summer I had some challenges. My daughter was stuttering, and we went to Cobb County Schools to get services. And so she went to get tested. And when it was time to have the meeting, I went into this room, and there were two educators at the table. And they pulled out all of these papers and started using all these acronyms. And they were using words and terms that in 10 years on being on the education committee, I was unfamiliar with. And I will never forget that moment because I felt so intimidated. I felt powerless as a parent. And then I stopped and I realized I'm the parent. I'm the person that they're supposed to be serving. This is my child that we're making decisions about. And so it made me wonder, what is it like for other parents who sit in rooms, who walk in schools where they're intimidated and people use all kinds of acronyms that they don't understand? And it turns out that Layla never needed any of those services. And while that was a relief to me, again, I thought about what about the other parents who needed those services, who heard about the CRCT and the CCRPI and Common Core and NCLB and all of these terms that were unfamiliar and foreign to them. And so in no way am I saying that all schools are unwelcoming to parents. But what I am saying is that there's a real disconnect between parents and school systems. We have to acknowledge that parents often feel powerless in education. We're sometimes made to feel that if we just leave education to the experts, then everything will be okay. And so we may not know all the acronyms. We may not be able to tell you the difference between GPS and CCSS, or the CCRPI and what subgroup made the school a priority school. But what they do know is what's best for their child and when they're in an environment that doesn't work for them. And the truth is, there are parents who can talk about AYP and what waivers we have from NCLB. Those who have tried to change the system but are too often met with opposition and intimidation. And so the Parent Empowerment Act is one tool that gives parents the voice they deserve to impact the most important decision they will make in their child's life. And in this case, it's a pretty high threshold that parents in a school who deserve to have some change will have access to that tool. And so who are we to decide that parents aren't capable of making decisions in the best interest of their kids when clearly the current system isn't working for some of them? For those parents who are pleased with their public schools, and most of them are, this bill will not impact them or their schools. But there are parents in this state who've done everything we've asked them to do. They volunteer, they go to all the meetings, they do all of those things, but they still can't get the reform their kids deserve. They shouldn't have to change schools, move, or send their kids to private school when they simply want their own school to work. Why not give them a tool that gives them the voice they deserve? And so I understand as I close that there's a sense of fear of trying things new in education. It's a system that many of us are products of, and we want to protect it at all costs. And while that fear is valid, the greater fear that I have is that we will continue to send kids to schools that just don't work, robbing them of the quality education we promised them. And so I ask you to vote faith over fear. I ask you to vote yes to give parents the same power over their own children that the state has. One thing I know is that every person in this room cares about education. We also want parents to be empowered. And we may disagree on what education looks like or what even parental engagement is. But I submit to you that this Parental Engagement Act is the ultimate form of engagement. A chance for parents to have a real voice, putting power in empowerment, to be taken seriously as real stakeholders in education who are the best experts of their own children. Let's stand up for parents, vote yes, and let's make parents real partners in education. Mr. Speaker, I will yield for questions.
You
if there are
have
any.
questions if you care to yield.
I'll yield for a couple.
Chair recognizes Representative Frazier to your right for a question. Guess she's not there.
I was looking forward to that question.
Okay, well, you're going to continue to look forward to it. Chair recognizes Representative Kaiser to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the lady yield?
I yield.
Representative Morgan, is it not true that you and I talk a lot about the struggles in each of our districts in public education, and that is it not further true that of the two schools in my district, middle schools in the community where I serve, one of which is 70% free and reduced lunch children, the second has a higher number than that. Of those two middle schools, 194 of those students applied to go to North Atlanta High School, and 10 of those students got into North Atlanta High School. So is it not true that we're not talking about affluent children. These are low income to middle income, black, white, Hispanic, and some Asian children whose parents are willing to make the move to try to get them into a school in North Atlanta that they saw as a better fit for their kids. Is that not true?
That is true.
Would you further yield?
Yes.
Is it not true that we've also had the conversation about the community where I live, which actually prompted me to run for this office, where parents, my community was decimated by parents getting in their cars and exercising the choice to go to a private school, or parents who could afford to moved out of the community. And so we see, is it not true, some of our communities decimated by those choices.
I think you're right, Representative Kaiser, and it's a point that I made a few minutes ago that we often have these discussions about choice and taking away from traditional public schools. This is an opportunity to protect and change the schools that kids are already in. So it's an opportunity for parents to be able to better the schools that they're in and strengthen the communities that they live in.
Will you further yield?
Sure.
One final point. I know that we've talked about some of my concerns with the devil being in the details of the bill, but is it not true, regardless of the devil in the details, that this ultimately triggers the local school board to make a decision at the behest of the teachers or parents?
It is, and it's debatable as to whether or not it has the teeth that we want or not, but I do appreciate the author's intent, which is to make sure that school boards are very engaged in these conversations, and it really forces them to have to sit at the table and listen to parents, which right now that mechanism is not in place.
Lady's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the will.
And other members that wish to speak to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Floyd. Representative Floyd. Representative Floyd to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in opposition to House Bill 123, the Parent and Teacher Empowerment Act, commonly known as the Parent Trigger Bill. This legislation allows that a petition be made to the local Board of Education to convert the school to a charter school or impose one of 6 turnaround models by requiring signatures of either the majority of the parents of the students of low achieving school or a majority of the faculty or instructional staff members of a low achieving school. In theory, the bill will give power to the parents of students attending the school and faculty staff who work at the school. The problem with this theory is the actual implementation, into practice. What we have learned, let's look at what the bill in its written form and look back at the history of the reform we have tried to do to education. As stated, the Parent Trigger Bill is supposed to aid low-achieving schools to help our children. The bill defines a low-achieving school as an acceptable rating of student achievement, student gap closure, student progress, or any combination. A school that is in the bottom 20% in the state based on ratings by the Department of Education. a public elementary or middle school in which fewer than 65% of students meet or exceed expectations on a criteria-based reference test. A public high school where the graduation rate the previous year was less than 65%. If the majority of the parents or faculty and staff gained the required signatures, the Board of Education would be able to implement one of the following 6 turnaround models, including conversion to a charter school. This bill assumes that a charter school is better than a traditional school, as evident from the Mathematica Policy Institute study. On average, charter schools do no better than public schools. In 2012, Bridge Magazine, by public sector consultants, did a study of the 20-year impact of charter schools on Michigan. And Gary Myron, a Western Michigan University professor, stated that while he looked favorably upon the original intent of charter schools, he is increasingly concerned that after 2 decades and substantial growth, the charter school idea has strayed considerably from its original version. A growing body of research, as well as state and federal evaluations conducted by independent researchers, continue to find that charter schools are not achieving the goals that were once envisioned for them. But let's look at where Georgia is. According to the Georgia Board of Education State Charter School Commission briefing of 2012, the gaps between conversions, startup charters, and non-charters are not great enough to say that charters are better across the board. Real school reform includes pushing for smaller class sizes, initiatives to improve reading and math skills, encouraging parent involvement, and other research-based reforms that we know work. I stand in disagreement of House Bill 123 because of the 6 states that currently have parent trigger bills laws on the books. House Bill 123 would make Georgia the extreme state in the country by not allowing public schools to have the time to implement corrective action before they are subject to the trigger. I stand in disagreement of House Bill 123 because over the past decade, the General Assembly has cut $5.6 billion in funding, creating an issue of how the state will address instituting the trigger. I stand in disagreement of House Bill 123 because I believe it has not been fully studied and the implications for Georgia families have not compared to other states. Finally, I stand in disagreement of House 123 because current standards for Georgia would have to be completely refigured. The state has recently put the public school system through many changes, and not only would this create confusion, but it would also cost the taxpayers due to the complexity of the process. If we are to support our students, we need to support our schools now and not turn them over to private institutions that would want to revamp the neighborhood. Organizations are more interested in pushing our children out to make room for their own agendas. If we are to support our parents in empowering them to fight for their children, HB 123 does not empower our parents or our teachers and certainly does not protect our students. Mr. Speaker, with that, I yield the well.
You have a couple of questions if you care to yield. Gentleman's yielding the well. Chair recognizes Representative Wilkerson to speak on the bill. Representative Wilkerson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A few years ago, before I had children and started not doing what I'm, going to the ante room, I used to work out a lot. And at the time, I actually was a personal trainer for a while, and people would ask me, how do I lose weight? How do I get in shape? And I would say, eat right, start a workout program, and get a good night's sleep. Instead, people would watch late night infomercial commercials and come up with the Atkins diet, the South Beach diet. The one guy, even tried a beer diet. Lost about 20 pounds on drinking nothing but beer and nothing else. I'm sure, especially this time of night. But I'll tell you something, it didn't work out too well for him after a while. Another guy ate bacon, that's all he ate. Sometimes when I hear us talk about education, I feel like I'm watching an infomercial at night. We know in this room what will raise student achievement. We know reasonable class sizes, we know a quality teacher, and we know parental involvement. You get those things together and you got a good chance for success. This bill does nothing to address any of those 3 points. I value parental involvement. As you know, I have 2 young children in a Title I school sitting in South Cobb, and we're there all the time. We spend a lot of time at the schools. I see a lot of other families doing that. But this bill does not address that. I do have a few concerns. Why is the level at 50%? It takes 50%, not 50 plus 1, but 50% of the people that show up. We still have a question whether it's not the people that show up at a meeting or the people zoned for that district. This bill also does not address if you have a parent petition and a teacher petition, which one takes precedence? Who wins out? If the parents if the teachers find out that you're going to do it and they decide to do it first, who has the option? The parents or the teachers? And then finally, if you go to line 174 of the bill, I had this question. I know in my district, it says any parent or guardian that does not want to send their child to that school has an option. And that was one of my concerns. If you convert the only school in my area, my zone school, to a charter school, and some of the parents don't want to go there, what option do they have? Well, unlike HB 251 that's based on space available, this basically says my kids can go anywhere. My children can go anywhere. So East Cobb, start building trailers because you're going to start seeing children come over there. Or other places, start building trailers because it has nothing to do with space available. So we could potentially have one school with 2,000 kids because we have not defined in this bill that I see where this school board has any authority once this has been triggered to decide that. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity to get parents involved. I value that. But I'm saying if we're going to do something, make sure we're addressing those things that will help raise student achievement, not just sell a diet pill like we're doing a late night infomercial that are going to have parents waking up. What happened to their tax dollars and what happened to their children because they still do not have a quality education. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You have questions if you care to yield.
I'll yield.
Chair recognizes Representative Frazier to your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
My question was previously for Representative Morgan, but maybe you can help me understand.
We're both from Cobb County. Go ahead.
Okay. I understand that there's a 50% tile for the parents to vote for a charter school. During the history of charter schools, a lot of them don't make it because of managerial problems and funding issues. So is there any provisions in this bill, if that school doesn't work, does it take another 50% of them to turn it back to a traditional school?
It is not my understanding because currently, once it's triggered to a charter school, you no longer have that trigger opportunity. So, and I think that was one of the questions that people had is that, can you trigger a charter? And they said no, because once you've bought that magic pill, you can't take it back. So no, there is not an opportunity, is my understanding of that. And maybe when the author comes back up, he can explain that.
Does the gentleman yield further?
I do.
In my county, in Burke County, I have one large high school, middle school, and elementary school. And I'm concerned about if one of those schools, some of them hold up to 3,000 children, becomes a charter school. I'm concerned about that school failing because in my district, we have no other options or no other choices to send our children to.
Yes.
So this is one of the concerns I have about this process. There's a lot of holes in it, and we need to fix a lot of things that if we were to go this route.
And
Do you agree?
I would agree with that. I would agree with that, especially for our rural counties that may only have one and that serve that area. I agree with that.
Thank you.
Do you wish to yield further?
I will.
Chair recognizes the minority leader, Representative Abrams, to your left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
I do.
Is it not true that while I appreciate the whip's willingness to make corrections to this bill, is it not true that we've had difficulty getting the Senate to agree to changes that we want to make once a bill leaves this chamber?
That is my understanding.
Is it not further true that as it's currently written, despite the intent stated by the author, this bill would allow a majority of the minority to fundamentally change the structure of a school, and there is nothing contained in this bill that would stop that from happening, so that the scenario I presented earlier could actually allow 20% of the population of a school to actually convert or close down a school in a community?
That is also my understanding. That is true.
Is it not further true that the definition of a public charter management company is vague and thus does not really provide any protections other than to acknowledge that this would be a company that would manage a charter school?
That is also my understanding.
Is it not further true that Georgia does not have standards governing what can be comprised as a charter management company?
That is also my understanding.
My final question would be, going to Representative Frazier's concern, if you are in a school district where you are the single school, and that school, for example, experiences a natural disaster, and in the context of that natural disaster, you may lose enough students that let me take a step back. You will lose a certain number of students who may have been there at the beginning of the school year and may not finish. Could that not decrease your graduation rate in your school?
That is also true.
Then is it not true that under the terms of this bill, if you look at the conditions under which a school can be considered low performing, if you look at lines 39 and 40, you could have a public high school that, because of a natural disaster, is suddenly considered a low-performing school, and under the terms and conditions of this bill could be subject to conversion to charter school or some other machination put together by a minority of parents who have been waiting for an opportunity?
That is true.
Thank you.
You've got a couple of minutes left. Do you wish to yield,
I'll take another question.
All right.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Morgan to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
From Cobb County, I do.
Thank you. I have just a couple of questions, and one just popped up. One in particular, how many natural disasters have we had in Georgia over the last 20, 30 years?
How many natural disasters? I would say several. I know that recently we, North Georgia had a hurricane. I guess I could go back and look at some of the storms, but I do know that over the years we had to look at price regulations on gasoline when there were storms. We had an influx of folks when there was a natural disaster in another area that had to move up here that may impact the graduation rate.
Did any of those natural disasters, Representative Wilkerson, did any of those affect a graduation rate in a low-performing school?
I would have to assume anytime you have a traumatic event that impacts a family, I would have to say that it would impact, because my first reaction as a parent is to take care of the safety in my family. And so I would say that, yes, I would have to say that's a true statement.
Does the gentleman further yield?
I do.
Would you agree that perhaps the bigger natural disaster is the number of kids who don't graduate from high school in Georgia?
I would agree that this bill is not the way to address that. I would agree that parental involvement, properly funding class size, and putting the $1 billion back in education would probably be a better way. I'm not saying that there's not other ways, but I'm saying that this bill is not that. But yes, I would agree. We have the same challenges in Cobb County. That's why, we spend a lot of time in the schools and I appreciate some of the things we're doing. For example, we have given the flexibility to use iPads. So our Title I school is walking around doing geometry classes using an iPad in the school. So I would say that those type of changes are what we need, not giving people that fake option of empowering them when it's really necessarily maybe not.
Does the gentleman further yield?
I do.
I want to ask you about charter schools, because there seems to be a lot of confusion about what this bill is.
Yes.
Are you familiar with the 6 options in the bill?
I am relatively familiar. Yes, I am familiar with the options in the bill, yes.
Of those 6, how many of those deal with charter schools?
That's a good, let me go to them. You are an author on the bill, would you like to tell me?
Sure. Of the 6 options, one of them allow for a charter school conversion.
Okay.
So I would offer, isn't it true that this is really not a charter school bill? It's really a bill that allows for many options, and it's based on what the parents in the school want.
What I would say is I was not arguing for or against it being a charter school bill. What I'm arguing for or against is what happens to those families that are still in that school, and are we really truly giving them an option? And if we are going to give that option, make sure that it's a majority of those parents that attend the school and it's done in an open way. So,
one final question.
Yes.
If you'll yield. There was a question about a charter school closing once it is converted. Are you familiar with how charter schools work in Georgia?
I am very familiar. We've had two that were closed by our school, well, one that was closed by our school board recently in Mableton, and I'm very familiar with them. So yes, they were opened up right when my children were looking at attending school. So yes, I'm very familiar with charter schools. Kennesaw has a charter school. Marietta is actually a charter school system.
So my question is to the lady who didn't get to ask me, isn't it true that in charter schools, to her question, that when it does not meet its contractual agreement with the local district or the state, whomever they are, and both entities are in agreement with, that in fact the school will be closed? And in the case of a conversion charter, if it does not meet, again, its contractual agreements and it goes back to the traditional public school?
I think her concern, yes, is for those districts that are in rural areas where there may only be one school. But also, I do know that at our school, for example, we have taken back students that have gone to, say, a charter school or some of the school, and the quality of education, that transition back actually hurt the parents more than it did initially. So, like I said, it's not necessarily, this is not a charter school argument on the bill. It's more of a process of making sure that we are truly giving parents the options that will help raise student achievement, whereas we just have not seen that in the 6 states where it's already been tried. I think one successful case recently was in California, where the school board, the parents, and everybody worked together, and that's the way it should work. But for the most part, in 6 states, it has not been successful at raising student achievement. I think that's the concern, not the fact that it is a charter school.
So again, I want to clarify, because you didn't answer my question.
Okay.
Isn't it true, Representative Wilkerson, that in the case of a conversion charter, not a startup, that if a school does not meet its contractual agreement in terms of student achievement and other elements that are in their contract, that it will revert back to a traditional public school? Again, I'm answering Representative Frazier's question about how conversion charters, which is what we're dealing with in this bill, how they work in this state.
At a certain time point, there is that you can convert back, I believe, but it depends on the timing of it, and it may not happen right away because, for example, I have a tenant pays rent. She may say, you're going to get your rent, but if it's 3 months later, that does not help me, or 4 months later. So yes, there are processes, but what we're looking at is that initial conversion and the impact it will have on those families that are in those schools.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Speaker, I will yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. What purpose does Representative Welch rise?
Make a motion.
State your motion.
Move the previous question.
The gentleman has moved the previous question. Is there objection? There is no objection. Clerk will ring the bell. The previous question has been ordered. We go now to the minority report. We go to the minority report. Under the rules of the House, the minority report has 20 minutes. Chair recognizes Representative Thomas for the minority report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I'd first like to acknowledge Representative Lindsay, the author of the bill. As a member of the Education Committee, I can say that he has been very fair and open in discussions on this bill, and frankly, most of the bills that have come through, whether I have agreed with them or not. You know, We've been dealing with a lot of education bills, a lot of things that we're holding out to be something that will fix the problems that we're faced with in the state of Georgia in the area of education. We've been through the charter bill I don't know, what's the best term? The angst of getting charter schools established in the state. I frankly have been on both sides of that issue myself, so I can appreciate the issues we've dealt with on that. But when you start to look at what we've been doing lately in education, we're struggling to find ways to fix the fact that over the years, at least since I've been in this General Assembly, we have cut the education budget $5.5 billion. And we're looking for solutions to address the simple fact that we refuse, as a state, to fund the education system that we have in this state. We've gone through some iterations several years ago, 2004, in fact, under a different governor. There was the IE squared, investing in educational excellence. The idea by Governor Perdue was that a quality basic education, which is our funding formula, basic wasn't good enough. We needed excellence. We should not be settling for basic. So the IE Squared Commission was formed to go out there and figure out what would it actually take to fund an excellent education in this state. That was started in 2004. In 2007, the IE Squared Commission sort of died a slow, quiet death in some back alley. And what came out of that, instead of talking about funding an excellent education, was a rather lame attempt at saying, you know what? We realize we can't actually afford to fund an excellent education, so we're not going to talk about that. Instead, we're going to offer you flexibility. So flexibility is going to be our response to the fact that we're cutting billions of dollars out of the money that we acknowledge that we owe our students in Georgia. We're going to give you flexibility. That's the silver bullet. Now, the county that I live in, Gwinnett, our school district actually created or formed a contract with the state under IE Squared, which has given them a lot of flexibility. They can do things that, well, actually, things that everybody can now do, because we've decided to give flexibility to everybody independent of IE Squared, because we realize we're slicing everybody's budgets and we don't want to force them to actually sign a contract to achieve certain goals. We're just going to give them the flexibility. You know, I was in the chamber several weeks ago. I just happened to be walking in after we were through, and I bumped into a group of middle school students from Cobb County. I think it's Daniel Middle School in Marietta. And it was a PTA group and about 9 8th graders. And so I started talking to them. I was interested. I like students. I like education. We were chatting. And I was answering their questions, and one of the PTA members asked their students, well, can you tell the representative what your concerns are? And so this young lady, a very bright 8th grader, she said, well, first, in our classroom, there are so many students that you can't even walk into the classroom without bumping things off of desks and knocking other students over. And then she said, and the other thing is, our textbooks are in such bad shape, the pages are all kept together by tape, and we're not allowed to take them out of the classroom for fear that they either won't come back or they'll come back more damaged. That is the consequence of our unwillingness to actually tackle problems in our education system. Now, are schools all performing well? Absolutely not. Is money going to fix all of those schools? Absolutely not. And nobody believes that, and certainly I don't. Are we taking some steps to try and address those things? Well, I think we are. For example, and I know this was somewhat controversial, but I was very supportive of looking at new ways at evaluating teacher performance. The simple fact of the matter is we actually have bad teachers in some classrooms, and we need to fix that. Good teachers make a difference. Good leadership makes a difference. We all know that. You know that whether you're dealing in schools, sports, the political world, we all know that leadership matters. But there are no little silver bullets. And, we threw out IE Squared as a silver bullet. I know school choice is very popular. I know charter schools are very popular. But there are no panacea. There are no simple solutions to that. If you look at the research on charter schools, for example, and there's been a number of fairly substantive studies, what they show is that basically charter schools perform no better than traditional public schools. They're not a silver bullet. IU squared was no silver bullet. Flexibility is no silver bullet. What we have an obligation to do is to understand where we are having problems, put the resources into fixing those problems, and stop looking for simple tricks that are somehow we think are going to transform the education system in this state. It's just not viable. It's not going to work. We have no evidence that any of these other things have worked. When you're slashing billions and billions of dollars from the schools and putting handcuffs on school districts from raising more when they might need to, what do we expect the outcome to be? Now, yes, is it possible that under a parent trigger bill that there could be some school somewhere that is actually transformed and provides a better educational opportunity for a child? Absolutely, it's possible. I freely admit that. Is it possible that the same thing will happen and that school will also fail? Yes, it's also possible. I mean, we're hoping, we're praying, we're wishing that these efforts will make a difference, but we're just dancing around the edges of a much bigger problem. And Mr. Speaker, I would submit that our willingness to just stick our heads in the sand on these and come up with flashy new ways to look like we're doing something is not the solution to the issues in our education system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. The final word goes to the chairman of the committee. Chair recognizes the chairman of the Education Committee, Chairman Coleman, for the final 20 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I can assure you I will not take the final 20 minutes, and I would like to yield a little of my time to the author of the bill. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you something. This, as the author stated earlier, this is one bill that has been discussed, it's been debated, it's been revised, and it has really been dealt with a lot of times. And I feel like we have developed what I consider a very, very important piece of legislation. It's going to be another tool in the toolbox for our school systems and what we're trying to do. And I want to say just first of all, why is this bill important to education and how will it help our schools? And I appreciate the minority report, what Representative Thomas said. He's right. All of these things we try to do, not one little thing's going to make a difference, but all these things in combination will make a difference. And we are going to find a way and we are going to be able to do it. But how is this bill, House Bill 123, going to help our schools? First of all, one of the things I think it's going to do that's very important, it's going to empower parents. It's empowering teachers by allowing them to get involved in the operations of their school. We can say what we want to, but they're not. Teachers are afraid. They're not empowered today. The second thing it's going to do, and I think this is critical, ladies and gentlemen, local boards are still in control, and I appreciate the author of the bill. When he met with me, what he did, we ensured that local boards are still in control. But the beauty is the local boards have to listen to the teachers, have to listen to the parents, and they have to get involved. The third thing, House Bill 123 allows local involvement at the local schools. And everything we've talked about, schools are more important and more successful when you have the local control. And the fourth thing, can you imagine that I think that's so important, the local control, can you imagine when 50% or 60% of any group gets involved with the local board or with you as a representative running for office? 50% of somebody or 60% of a group, that's a powerful group and sends a powerful message to you. That's what it's going to do. And I think this is the most important thing, ladies and gentlemen, with the direction we're taking now, and you just passed 4 pieces of legislation last week, education, critical legislation, pieces of it. With the direction we're taking, with the report card that we're developing, our schools by 2015 are going to be graded. They're going to have a grade. We'll know where they stand. Those that are doing A's, those doing B's, those making 100, 90, 50, and they will. This is giving us a way to look at these schools and giving us another tool in the toolbox to get involved. And I think that's the key, ladies and gentlemen. House Bill 123 provides another tool in the toolbox for parents and teachers to use in the management and operations of their schools. I want to appreciate everything. I appreciate everything everybody said, but I think people remember parent involvement, local control, Flexibility, we've got to have that with local control. That's what it's all about, and another tool in the toolbox. I want to ask the author of the bill now if he'll come forward, and he will answer any question he'd like to and sum up what was said about this bill. But I encourage you, vote for this bill. It was vetted, it was discussed, and it's an important piece of legislation for our schools.
14 minutes remaining.
Well, I won't take
Chair
anywhere.
recognizes the Majority Caucus whip to take the balance of the chairman's time. Representative Lindsay.
My apologies, Mr. Speaker. I just know folks are ready to vote. So just very quickly, let's just go through these. And I'm not going to take any questions because I think we've already vetted this well enough. But let me sort of point out some key points. Someone said this is not a silver bullet. You're absolutely right. There is no such thing as a silver bullet when it comes to education reform. This is, however, an important tool in the toolbox of education reform. We need this bill just as much as we need all the other bills that Chairman Brooks Coleman is bringing forth. Number two, whether or not charter schools are actually better for students. The fact of the matter is, particularly for those students that most need public education, kids who come from low-income households, the absolute gold standard when it comes to studies is the Stanford report that was issued a few years ago. According to the Stanford study, low-income students perform better in charter schools than they do in traditional schools. Number three, question was, well, someone said, well, this has nothing to do with improving parental involvement. Folks, this has everything to do with parental involvement. That's what this bill is all about, is making sure that there's greater parental involvement in the local schools and making sure that parents' voices are heard by the local school board. Next number, I found this rather amusing. Somebody said, well, it doesn't require over 50% plus one, it just requires 50%. Folks, throughout the bill, more than 50%, more than 50%, more than 50%, more than 50%. What that statement tells me is that folks are up here arguing against this bill that have not read it, plain and simple. Next question was, well, what about local concerns? If, when it comes to a county with only one school, or there's a particular concern about a natural disaster in that area, and then maybe this bill won't apply. Well, folks, that's why we've kept it local. That's why the local board will have the ultimate decision as to whether or not this is the step to take or not. That's why we have done it the way we have done it, rather than allow somebody not in that local community to make the decision, but to make the folks in that local community to make the decision. The bottom line, folks, is that if you are going to stand with your parents and stand with your teachers and give them a voice before their local school board, and allow their petition not only to be presented, but to be heard and acted on by their local board. If you believe in the First Amendment to the Constitution, if you believe in the state constitution regarding the right of petition, I ask for you to vote for this bill. The time is late. I know we're ready to vote and to move on to other matters. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Mr. Clerk, would you ring the bell? We're going to getting ready to vote. The previous question has already been ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute on House Bill 123? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. There is an amendment, and the Kaiser amendment. The clerk will read the amendment.
Representative Kaiser, the 59th, offers the following amendment. Amend the House Committee on Education Use Substitute, House Bill 123. This amendment is AM 33-1304. It's printed on your desk. Kaiser, 59th, offers the amendment to the committee substitute on House Bill 123.
Is there objection to adopting the Kaiser amendment? There is no objection. The amendment is adopted. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute as amended? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 123 will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 123. The ayes are 97, the nays are 74. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 104. House Bill 104.
House Bill 104, Representative Carson of 46, bill being entitled Admin Code Section 40-2-86, relating to special license plates, to add a special license plate supporting the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. Bill has been before the House Committee on Motor Vehicles. Committee recommends the bill pass by substitute. Bill is being read for the third time.
Chair recognizes Representative Carson to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the annual tag bill from the Motor Vehicles Committee. It has three basic sections. The first is in regard to the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. We have an Appalachian Trail tag. We're making that a revenue sharing tag. Second, this creates an Atlanta Braves Foundation tag for philanthropic purposes. Third, it has some cleanup language in regard to exactly who is a veteran for veterans plates and disbursement of funds for Aid Atlanta. And I'll yield for questions.
You have no questions.
I yield the will, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 104 will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the passage of House Bill 104, the ayes are 168, the nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 480. House Bill 480.
House Bill 480 by Representative Ballinger of the 23rd, a bill entitled Admin Code Section 17854, relating to persons allowed to be present in courtroom when a person under the age of 16 testifies concerning a sex offense, so as to add victim assistance personnel to the list of persons. That bill having been before the House Committee on Judiciary and Non-Civil, the committee recommends the bill pass by way of a committee substitute. The bill is being read for the third time.
Chair recognizes Representative Ballinger to present the bill. Representative Ballinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I rise today on behalf of HB 480. HB 480 adds victim advocates to the list of people allowed to remain in the courtroom when the courtroom is closed as a result of a witness who is under the age of 16 is testifying regarding a sex offense. And I will thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be happy to yield to any questions.
You have well, let's see. You had a couple of questions, and now you have more than a couple of questions. Chair recognizes Representative Taylor to your right for a question.
Ms. Ballinger,
Yes.
welcome to the House. And
Thank you.
I'm not going to ask you a question other than one. Is this your first bill?
It is my first bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if you and your seatmate aren't talking, but the chair recognizes Representative Rogers to your right for a question.
Representative Ballinger.
Yes.
My seatmate. Sounds like a really good bill. The only question I have, I'm sitting here looking at the recap of it, and it says right here, it talks about enumerated persons. I'm from North Georgia. Would you explain enumerated to me, please?
Enumerated is a list of individuals that are allowed to remain within the courtroom. Right now, it lists parties to the cause and their immediate families or guardians, attorneys and their secretaries, officers of the court, jurors, newspaper reporters or broadcasters, and court reporters. Victim advocates are not enumerated in that list.
The lady learns well, and I appreciate you listening to me all along.
Thank you.
Do you further yield?
I will yield for one more question.
All right, we have to get the one from the Majority Caucus Whip, Representative Lindsay, to your right.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the lady yield?
Yes, I do.
Is it not true that you are behaving in an extremely underhanded way by bringing an excellent bill on a very serious subject that doesn't allow us to razz you sufficiently? And given the lateness of the hour, we're going to let this one pass, but the next time you come up, it's going to be an awfully long time for you.
I think it's a stroke of brilliance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank
I
you.
yield the
Welcome
well.
to the House.
Lady has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 480 will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines.
What time did 266 go on the desk? 6:35.
Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. Go tell her, Representative Williams. Don't be explaining it to the chair. On the passage. All right, let me kind of. Yeah, just to be on the safe side, the vote on that was 168 yeas, 4 nays. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. All right, let me kind of tell you where we are on time. There is no dinner break tonight. We are, and from the first calendar today, and I want to be very clear on this, House Bill 1 is postponed until the next legislative day, which will be Thursday of this week. House Bill 1 will be on the calendar Thursday. We are going now to take up, we're going to take up the budget, which has been on your desk for about an hour and 25 minutes. You have a conference committee report that's on your desk, and it has a little time yet to go, and then we'll kind of see where we are. Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 116th District, Representative England, for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adopt the Committee of Conference report on House Bill 105.
The clerk will read the conference committee report.
Committee of Conference report on House Bill 105. The Committee of Conference on House Bill 105 recommends both the House Representatives and the Senate receive from their positions and the attached Committee of Conference substitute. House Bill 105 be adopted, respectively submitted for the House of Representatives. Honorable Terry England, representing 116th District. Honorable Jan Jones, representing 47th District. Honorable Larry O'Neill, representing 146th District for the Senate. Honorable Jack Hill, Senator 4th District. Honorable David Schaefer, Senator 48th District. Honorable Ronnie Chance, Senator 16th District.
The chair recognizes the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, Chairman England, to explain the Committee of Conference report for House Bill 105. The House will be in order. There are members that will want to hear this presentation. Proceed, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. We're glad to have in front of you finally a conference committee report on House Bill 105, which is the amended 13 budget. Before I get into the comments, I just want to kind of lay things out just a little bit for you. I'm going to go through the comments tonight and not go through the tracking document. However, if you have questions, I'll be glad to answer those about the tracking document, and just all this in being mindful of the time that everything is taking today. I do want to thank our staff. Martha and Christine are here from the budget office, and y'all, the hours, every time I go through this exercise, the hours that these two and our whole staff over there put in is just incredible. And just please be sure to shake their hand or hug their neck and tell them thank you for the time they stay away from their families. I'm glad to have them. They make me look smart, and that takes a lot. But I want to thank our colleagues across the hall, Senator Hill and his staff over there, and for their help in putting all this together, because it was a little more difficult than the previous two amended budgets I've had the opportunity to do, just because that we feel like that, it feels like things are looking a little better, but yet at the same time, revenues are not where they need to be to take care of the things we need to do. So getting into the comments, and if you'll just keep up with me, I'll roll through those and I'll tell you basically what the changes are in the document from the House position. As you'll remember, the original amended fiscal year 2013 budget was based on a revenue estimate about 3.9% growth over fiscal year 12, lower than the 5.2 proposed during the session last year. However, at the end of 7 months, net tax collections are up almost $564 million compared to the same point last year. So we are making that gradual climb. To that end, the governor has recognized in this document an additional $9.8 million in increased revenues since the time the bill left this House. This adjustment is reflected on the front page of your tracking document as a part of the new revenue estimate. The revised revenue estimate now adjusts state funds, including lottery, still down by about $218 million from what our original estimate was at the end of last year, and tempers the loss of some of those funds with adjusted payments to the Treasury from some of our authorities of about $22 million, one-time recognition of the National Mortgage Settlement Funds of $99.4 million, and the mid-year adjustment for education of $172.7 million. All of the net numbers winds up being still a reduction of about $16.5 million from the beginning of the fiscal year. While I will simply focus on a few of the changes from the House position, I'd like to remind you of all that we agreed to of the governor's adds. And those look at or comprise $245 million in growth for Medicaid, $43 million in increased motor fuel funds, and the use of $27 million from the motor fuel fund reserves for the removal of the Georgia 400 toll plaza. About $710,000 for the T1 lines at driver services to help expedite service there, and about $500,000 for the Peace Officers Indemnification Fund. I still can't say that word well, due to a large number of claims there. I'd also like to point out several of the House positions that have remained intact through the process, and the highlights of these actions include several. And that was the complete elimination of the cuts to the Georgia Youth Science Technology Centers and to the Superintendent's Leadership Program, the restoration of $659,320 for the residency development programs for Gwinnett Medical Center and the Southwest Georgia Consortium, an add back of about $488,000 for the Mercer and Morehouse operating grants to reduce the proposed reductions from a 3% to a 1.5%, and we'll get back to that in just a second. We also did a full restoration in the original document of $511,000 plus for the hypertension outreach services, and about $3.4 million to meet the existing obligations for current charter system grants. Differences that showed up between the House and Senate versions that we as the House Conference Committee have accepted are reductions to the councils of the judicial branch of about $131,000, $26,313 added back for the restoration of the sparsity grants to K-12 school systems, and the restoration of $40,000 contract for the Association of Adapted Sports. We also included $2.2 million to eradicate the mid-year reduction to Georgia Gwinnett College in the Senate version. The second half of funding needing to add to the House's increase, which fully restores the graduate medical education residency slots at Mercer and Morehouse Schools of Medicine and the GME slots as well. And about $500,000 in bonds that the governor recommended bringing out of the budget, we've agreed to keep in for the Ray Charles Fine Arts Center at Albany State. The major items adjusted from the House version are as follows. We added $10.4 million for the eligible private hospitals to participate, my tongue's tired, in the Disproportionate Share Hospitals, or DISH program, in the Indigent Care Trust Fund for a total of $17.2 million. The most up-to-date projection increased the need to a little over $19 million, and the conferees were able to maintain or attain all of the full funding. So ultimately, these funds will be matched with federal dollars and infuse about $50 million back into hospitals for healthcare services. We'd also proposed to infuse $1 million into the Roosevelt Warm Springs Institute for Rehabilitation. As one of our newest agencies established by the General Assembly last year, there have been additional needs identified as we redefine that facility and that agency's roles. Conferees have agreed to fund the hospital portion of the facility with an additional $5 million in operating funds for the year to finish them out, which allows for voc rehab dollars that are there to be segregated and maximized for a 4-to-1 match with available federal funds. You previously voted to add back over $500,000, about $548,000, to school nutrition. The revised revenue estimate allowed the conferees to completely eliminate the proposed 7.1% reduction to a 0 reduction there. Also in K-12 education, charter system grants were increased by about $4.4 million to fund the 2 newly eligible systems, both Fulton and Madison counties. And then the engineering scholarship figures and student finance have been trued up with an add of about $131,750 to meet that demand as well. I want to thank our subcommittee chairs once again for the work that they and their subcommittees did over the interim and while the budget was on that side, and coming back and the feedback that they've given us to help us kind of work through some of these things. And you know, it gives me a lot of pleasure that we're able to guard and stronghold a lot of the House priorities throughout this document. The Senate took up the bill about 5:20 this afternoon and passed it out unanimously. And we would like to do the same thing on this side if at all possible. And Mr. Speaker, at this time, if there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer a few.
I don't see any questions.
Well, if that's the case, Mr. Speaker.
What an explanation.
Well, you know, we just try to do our best. That being the case, I'd appreciate your yes vote, and I will yield the well.
On the adoption of the Conference Committee report on House Bill 105, all those in favor of the adoption of the Conference Committee report will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine.
What's March?
Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the adoption of the Committee of Conference report. on House Bill 105. The ayes are 173, the nays are 0. This House has unanimously adopted the conference committee report on the amended FY13 budget. What purpose does Representative Chokas rise?
Mr. Speaker, to make a motion,
State your motion.
I move that the House temporarily suspend its rules so that a bill may be read for the first time and assigned to committee, please.
Clerk will read the caption.
Bill by Representative Chokas, 138th. The bill will be entitled Act amending Title 20 relating to local boards of education.
On the motion of the gentleman that the rules of this House be temporarily suspended to allow a bill to be read for the first time and assigned to committee, is there objection? Chair hears none. It is so ordered. Education. What purpose does Representative Beasley Teague rise?
Mr. Speaker,
What purpose do you rise?
I'm ready to go home.
Well, Representative, I think others are too, and we're about to give you an opportunity to do that, okay? What purpose does Representative Peake rise? House will be in order.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a motion.
State your motion.
I'd like to move that the rules be temporarily suspended unanimously so the bill can be heard.
Let me see if I understand what you're doing. You correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay. Please help me out, Mr. Speaker.
Are you making a motion that this House give unanimous consent to waive the rule requiring that a conference committee report lay on the desk for 1 hour before it be considered by the House?
Yes, sir. That is exactly what I'm asking.
And that applies to the conference committee report on House Bill 266.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
On the gentleman's motion that this House give unanimous consent to waive the rules of this House requiring that a committee of conference report lay on the desk for 1 hour prior to consideration, is there objection? Chair hears none. It is so ordered. Whenever you have a minute, Representative Peake, you can come down here and we'll do a little further business. The chair recognizes Representative Peake for a motion.
All righty, this is some fun. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adopt the Committee of Conference report on House Bill 266.
The clerk will read the conference committee report on House Bill 266.
Committee of Conference report on House Bill 266. The Committee of Conference on House Bill 266 recommends both the Senate and the House of Representatives receive from their positions the attached Committee of Conference substitute to House Bill 266 be adopted. Respectfully submitted for the House of Representatives, Representative Peake, 141st, Representative O'Neill, 146th, Representative Rice, the 95th, Senator Hill, 32nd, Senator Underman, the 45th.
Chair recognizes Representative Peake to explain the Committee of Conference report for House Bill 266.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One, just thank you for the unanimous consent on that. Drinks and dinner for everybody at Cheddar, since we'll be getting out of here real sooner. Basically, we've had a lot of discussion about this bill. Originally was House Bill 266. It had HB 80, which we all unanimously passed. And the final clarification was really the buy here, pay here piece, which many of you have heard about. And basically what we did in this bill, in the final bill, is we clarified what a buy here, pay here dealership is by allowing the Department of Revenue to make the determination and set the criteria for these type of dealerships, and they will receive a reduced title fee of 2.5% below the current title fee. That's the guts of the change that we made, and Mr. Speaker, I would ask that this House move this legislation forward as it's needed for dealerships all over the state, and I'll be more than glad to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay, Chair recognizes Representative Kaiser for a question to your left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Parliamentary inquiry. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Representative Peake, is it not true that you and I are both, I think, the only two small business restaurateurs in the House?
I think we added John Pizol this year, but that would make us a caucus of three,
Well,
yes.
Okay, he may want to chime in here, but I just want for the record to say, is it not true that I went to Emory University and not Auburn University?
I deserve it. It's okay. It's okay.
You don't appear to have any other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask for your consent and favorable vote on House Bill 266. Thank you.
On the adoption of the Conference Committee report on House Bill 266, all those in favor of the adoption of the Conference Committee report will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the adoption of the Conference Committee report on House Bill 266, the ayes are 171, the nays are 0. This House has adopted the Committee of Conference report on House Bill 266. All right, stay with me here just for a second. As the days get longer, we have some really great young people that stay with us and work all day. I want y'all to thank the Pages who are still here with us at this late hour. Kevin Mason, Brooks Fletcher, and Alan Sam. Chair announces House Bill 78 will be postponed to the next legislative day. House Bill 238 will be postponed to the next legislative day. House Bill 454 will be postponed to the next legislative day. House Bill 473 will be postponed to the next legislative day. House Bill 240 will be postponed to the next legislative day. House Bill 402 will be postponed to the next legislative day. House Bill 497 will be postponed to the next legislative day. House Bill 371 will be postponed to the next legislative day. And the chair earlier announced House Bill 1 will be postponed to the next legislative day. There do not appear to be any announcements. I'm sorry. There is an announcement. Chair recognizes Chairman Jacobs for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The MARTA Oversight Committee, MARTOC, will meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. in room 406 of the Coverdell Legislative Office Building.
Chair recognizes Representative Shaw for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just want to remind everybody that we have a rural caucus meeting at lunch tomorrow, so we expect a big crowd, and we're going to meet in the Ag Building at 201, and thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Smith for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Natural Resources and Environment Full Committee meeting tomorrow at 9 o'clock, room 506.
Chair recognizes Chairman Rice for an announcement.
Well, I'm going to thank God that I'm free of House Bill 80 and all those things that are in it after 4 or 5 years. So, you know, that's a great thing. But we're going to do that tomorrow morning at 8:30, Legislative Fellowship down at 107.
Chair recognizes Chairman Cooper for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Health and Human Services Committee, we meet tomorrow at 11 o'clock in LOB 606. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
That appears to complete. The chair recognizes the Majority Caucus Whip, Representative Lindsay, for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Majority Caucus Discussion Group will meet tomorrow at 1 o'clock in Judiciary Committee meeting, room 133. That's 1 o'clock to discuss the bills that will be on the floor on day 30. Thank you very much.
Chairman Meadows. Chairman Meadows, do you wish to make an announcement?
We're going to have a supplemental calendar here in about 3 minutes.
No, that wasn't the announcement that I wanted you to, or I hoped you would make.
Those of you in Ruse have probably got it. Ruse will meet tomorrow morning at 10, different time, 10 o'clock.
Is that it? Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Chair recognizes the Majority Leader of this House for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I know this is going to be a horrible disappointment to all the members that are still standing ready, as always, to work for the people of Georgia. But I reluctantly move that we now adjourn until 10 a.m. Thursday morning, March 7th, 2013.
On the motion of the Majority Leader that this House stand adjourned until Thursday, March the 7th at 10 o'clock a.m., when we will reconvene for Legislative Day 30 All those in favor of the motion will please say aye. All those opposed will say no. The chair and Representative Beasley Teague will break the tie and vote to adjourn. This House will be adjourned until Thursday at 10 o'clock a.m.